Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Wisdom Channel. Tonight, we'll be exploring the life, ideas, and lasting influence of Plato, one of the most important thinkers in human history. He did far more than leave behind famous philosophical arguments. He built a way of thinking that still shapes how people ask questions about truth, love, justice, and how to live a good life. His dialogues can feel surprisingly modern because they rarely hand us easy answers. Instead, they force us to examine what we believe and why we believe it. Along the way, we'll encounter strange thought experiments, radical political ideas, and stories that have influenced philosophy for more than 2,000 years. Some of Plato's ideas became foundations of Western thought. Others remain controversial, challenging, and difficult to forget. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Let your shoulders relax and notice your eyes grow heavy. And as the day begins to gently fade away, join me as we explore Plato's extraordinary ideas together. Let's begin. Plato believed that most people mistake their own experiences for reality. What we see every day may not reveal what things truly are. Plato thought the senses give us an incomplete picture because everything around us changes. A beautiful face ages. A strong building eventually crumbles. Even our opinions can reverse overnight. Yet we still recognize ideas such as beauty and equality, as though some stable standard exists behind the changing examples. This led Plato toward one of philosophy's boldest possibilities. The world we touch may be less fundamental than the truths the mind can understand. He called these deeper realities forms. They were not merely thoughts inside our heads. They represented perfect and unchanging patterns that physical things only approximate. A drawn circle is never perfectly circular, yet geometry deals confidently with perfect circles. Plato saw a profound clue here. Human beings may spend their lives surrounded by imperfect copies, while rarely asking what makes recognition possible in the first place. For him, philosophy began when someone stopped accepting the visible world as the whole story. Socrates' execution transformed Plato's understanding of politics and justice. Plato was still a young man when Athens condemned his teacher to death. Socrates had not led an army against the city or stolen public wealth. His great offense was questioning people who believed they were wise. A democratic jury found him guilty of impiety and corrupting the young. The sentence left Plato facing an unsettling problem. What happens when a society legally destroys one of its most thoughtful citizens? He became deeply suspicious of the idea that political decisions become wise simply because many people support them. Public opinion could be manipulated. Anger could overpower judgment. Popular leaders could flatter citizens instead of improving them. Plato's later political philosophy grew from this wound. He began asking whether government should depend on expertise rather than popularity. He also wondered whether rulers needed years of moral and intellectual training before receiving power. His proposals became controversial, but the question behind them remains uncomfortable. If ordinary people would never choose an untrained surgeon, why should they trust political power to people who have never learned how to govern well? The Allegory of the Cave explains how comfortable illusions can imprison us. In the Republic, Plato asks us to imagine people who have spent their entire lives chained inside an underground chamber. They cannot turn their heads. Behind them burns a fire, and objects passing before it cast shadows onto a wall. Because the prisoners have never seen anything else, they assume those shadows are reality itself. Then one prisoner is released. At first, the truth hurts. The fire dazzles him. The objects seem less convincing than the shadows he already understands. Eventually, he reaches the world outside and sees things illuminated by the sun. The shocking part comes when he returns. His old companions do not welcome the discovery. They distrust him because his eyes no longer adjust easily to the darkness. Plato was describing something larger than ignorance. People can become emotionally invested in familiar explanations. A false picture of reality can feel safer than a difficult truth. The story has survived because it raises a disturbing possibility. Escaping deception may require more than receiving new information. It may require becoming willing to lose the world that once made sense. Plato argued that becoming good matters more than appearing successful. Much of ordinary life rewards appearances. A person can seem respectable while acting selfishly in private. A politician can sound virtuous while pursuing power. Someone can collect admiration without developing wisdom. Plato believed this gap between reputation and character was one of the great dangers of human life. His dialogues repeatedly push readers toward a difficult choice. Would you rather actually be just while being misunderstood, or appear just while secretly becoming corrupt? The question becomes extreme in the Republic. Plato imagines the truly just person losing status, while the perfectly unjust person gains praise by hiding wrongdoing successfully. This removes the usual rewards of morality. Justice must then prove its worth inside the person who possesses it. Plato's answer is psychological. Wrongdoing disorders the soul of the wrongdoer even when nobody discovers the crime. Success cannot repair that damage. Wealth cannot cancel it. Applause cannot transform injustice into health. This turns morality into something far more personal. The most important audience for your actions is not society. It is the character that your actions are quietly creating within you. His philosopher king united political power with genuine wisdom. Plato thought political disaster often begins with a dangerous separation. The people who understand what is good may lack power, while the people who possess power may lack understanding. His famous solution was the philosopher king. This ruler was not supposed to be a professor wearing a crown. Plato imagined someone trained for decades to resist corruption and understand justice before being trusted with authority. The process was deliberately demanding. Future rulers would study mathematics because it disciplined reasoning. They would receive physical training because leadership required endurance. Eventually, the strongest minds would study philosophy and learn to question their deepest assumptions. Even then, Plato did not want them ruling immediately. They needed practical experience before taking responsibility for an entire society. The radical point was that political leadership should be treated as a form of expertise. Nobody becomes a skilled navigator simply by wanting control of a ship. Plato believed government should be approached with similar seriousness. His proposal remains controversial because it creates another problem. Who decides who is genuinely wise? Yet the underlying challenge still cuts deeply into modern political life. Atlantis entered recorded literature through two unfinished Platonic dialogues. Almost everything behind the modern legend begins with Plato. The Lost Island appears in Timaeus and Critias, where it is described as a powerful civilization located beyond the Pillars of Heracles. Plato gives Atlantis unusual detail. Its rulers descend from Poseidon. Its territory contains elaborate engineering. Its military power threatens lands across the Mediterranean world. Then its fortunes reverse. The society becomes morally corrupted, and catastrophe follows. Critias ends before the story reaches its expected conclusion. That unfinished ending helped create one of history's most persistent mysteries. Was Plato preserving an ancient tradition, adapting older memories, or constructing a philosophical story designed to illustrate political decline? No independent ancient account has conclusively answered that question. This uncertainty created enormous room for later speculation. Generations of readers searched for Atlantis in the Atlantic, Mediterranean, and beyond. Plato may have intended his audience to think about the rise and fall of states rather than hunt for ruins. Yet by leaving the account suspended between history and philosophical storytelling, he created a mystery that has outlived almost every civilization mentioned in ancient literature. True education, for Plato, turns the mind toward what deserves understanding. Plato rejected the idea that teaching simply means placing information into an empty mind. He compared genuine education to changing the direction in which someone is looking. The ability to understand may already be present, yet it can remain focused on trivial things. This makes education a transformation of attention rather than a transfer of facts. In the Republic, the released prisoner from the cave does not receive a new pair of eyes. He learns to use the eyes he already has differently. Plato believed the same principle applies to thought. Intelligence can serve greed as easily as wisdom. A clever person may become extremely skilled at pursuing foolish goals. Education, therefore, has to shape what the mind values, not merely increase what it knows. This idea also explains why Plato cared so much about childhood formation. Habits developed early can influence what later feels natural or desirable. For him, learning was never neutral. Every education points the mind somewhere. The real question is whether it points toward truth and goodness, or simply makes someone more effective at chasing whatever they already happen to want. Plato taught that unchecked desires can quietly become our masters. Freedom sounds simple until desire enters the picture. Plato noticed that a person can technically be free while living under constant internal commands. One craving says eat, another says spend, another demands attention or pleasure. If every impulse receives obedience, Plato believed the individual becomes less free with every surrender. This strange reversal appears throughout his psychology. The person who always does what he feels like doing may imagine himself liberated, yet he can become dependent on increasingly powerful appetites. Plato's tyrannical personality represents the extreme case. Such a person wants complete freedom from restraint, but eventually becomes unable to refuse himself anything. His desires begin governing him more harshly than an external ruler might. The insight feels remarkably modern because it describes addiction without requiring a substance. Status can become compulsive. Approval can become compulsive. Even entertainment can begin controlling attention. Plato's answer was not the destruction of desire. He thought desires needed ordering, so they served a life directed by reason. Genuine freedom therefore meant something demanding. It meant developing the ability to say no to yourself when your own impulses were leading you somewhere worse. The academy became one of history's most influential communities of learning. Around the 4th century before the Common Era, Plato established a community outside Athens that later became known as the Academy. It was not a university in the modern sense. There were no standardized degrees or familiar lecture schedules. Instead, it became a place where serious thinkers could investigate difficult questions together over long periods. Mathematics held an especially important place there. Philosophy was also connected with astronomy and political thought. The Academy attracted minds who would shape intellectual history far beyond Plato's lifetime. Aristotle spent roughly 20 years associated with it before developing his own distinctive philosophy. The school continued in different forms for centuries, which gave Plato's approach an institutional life after his death. That may be one of his most consequential achievements. Ideas no longer depended only on a single charismatic teacher speaking to students. They could survive through an organized community devoted to argument and study. The Academy helped establish a model that still feels familiar today. Knowledge advances when people gather around shared questions, challenge one another, and preserve an intellectual tradition that can continue beyond any individual life. His greatest dialogues rarely give readers simple answers to difficult questions. Plato could have written philosophy as a collection of conclusions. Instead, he often staged conversations in which intelligent people disagree, misunderstand one another, revise positions, and occasionally end without solving the original problem. This was not accidental. The reader becomes another participant because the text forces us to decide which arguments actually work. In Euthyphro, the discussion about holiness finishes without a settled definition. Theaetetus investigates knowledge at extraordinary length and still closes without a final answer. Even when Socrates appears dominant, Plato often leaves difficulties behind that later philosophers have debated for centuries. This creates an unusual reading experience. The dialogue may remove your confidence before it gives you anything to replace it. Plato seems to have believed that recognizing confusion can be an intellectual achievement. Someone who falsely thinks he understands justice has little reason to investigate it. Someone who discovers that his definition collapses under questioning has finally begun. The unresolved endings, therefore, serve a purpose. Philosophy is not always about collecting answers. Sometimes it begins by discovering that the answer you carried confidently for years cannot survive 5 minutes of careful examination. Plato made Socrates the central speaker in many of his works. The historical Socrates left no philosophical writings of his own. Nearly everything we know about his thought comes through other people, and Plato became the most influential of them. This creates one of the great puzzles of ancient philosophy. When Socrates speaks in a Platonic dialogue, whose philosophy are we hearing? Early works may preserve something closer to the real Socrates, while later dialogues appear to contain ideas usually associated with Plato himself. Yet there is no perfect dividing line. Plato never steps onto the stage and announces which doctrines belong personally to him. Instead, he hides behind conversations. That choice gave Socrates an extraordinary second life. The barefoot Athenian questioner became one of history's most recognizable philosophical characters, constantly challenging generals, politicians, poets, and confident young men. Plato could explore ideas dramatically because readers watched arguments unfold between personalities rather than encountering anonymous propositions. The method also preserved ambiguity. Socrates can be brilliant in one conversation and strangely uncertain in another. Plato turned his teacher into more than a spokesman. He made him the living center of a philosophical world where arguments had character, tension, and consequences. Unlike ordinary teachers, Socrates often begins by admitting his ignorance. One of Socrates' most powerful habits was refusing to pretend that he possessed knowledge he could not defend. The famous idea that he knew he did not know is more complicated than simple humility. It was a method of attack against false certainty. Socrates would meet someone who confidently claimed to understand courage or virtue. Rather than delivering a lecture, he would ask for a definition. Then he tested that definition against examples until contradictions appeared. The person who began as an expert often ended the conversation confused. Socrates considered this improvement. False knowledge is especially dangerous because it prevents curiosity. If you already believe you understand something, you stop looking. Plato repeatedly presents ignorance, recognized honestly as a better starting point than confidence built on weak assumptions. This helps explain why Socrates irritated powerful Athenians. His questioning could expose how little respected people understood about the qualities they publicly claimed to possess. The method remains unsettling because it turns the usual hierarchy upside down. The person saying "I know" may be furthest from wisdom, while the person willing to admit uncertainty may finally be ready to learn. The Socratic method exposes hidden assumptions through disciplined conversation. The technique seems almost too simple. Ask someone what they believe, then keep asking what that belief actually means. Socrates used this approach to uncover contradictions that ordinary conversation allows to remain hidden. Suppose someone says courage means never retreating. A careful question can reveal situations where retreat is clearly the wiser and braver choice. The original definition then has to change. Socrates continues until the speaker either produces something stronger or admits that the subject is harder than expected. What makes the method powerful is that the opponent often supplies the evidence against his own position. Socrates does not need to shout or overwhelm anyone with information. He follows the implications of what has already been said. Plato used these exchanges to demonstrate how beliefs can contain assumptions that remain invisible until someone tests them. This makes philosophical conversation resemble an investigation. Each answer opens another door. Each contradiction narrows the possibilities. The method later influenced education and legal reasoning because it trains people to defend claims rather than merely repeat them. Its deeper lesson is uncomfortable. Many beliefs feel obvious only because nobody has patiently asked us what we really mean. Plato distinguished knowledge from beliefs that merely happen to be correct. Imagine someone tells you the correct road to a distant town, but he is only guessing. You follow his directions and arrive safely. The belief was true, yet something seems missing. Plato explored this problem in the Meno. A correct belief can guide action just as successfully as knowledge for a time. The difference is stability. Someone who genuinely understands why the road leads there can explain and defend the route. Someone who guessed correctly may abandon the belief as soon as another confident voice appears. Plato compares true opinions to valuable statues that might run away unless they are tied down. Reasoned understanding provides the tether. This distinction remains surprisingly important. People can reach correct conclusions for terrible reasons. A lucky prediction does not make someone an expert. Repeating accurate information does not necessarily mean a person understands it. Plato therefore pushed beyond asking whether a statement was true. He wanted to know what justified it and whether the thinker could explain its foundation. That move helped create one of philosophy's largest fields. Epistemology still investigates the difference between merely believing something true and actually having the right to say that you know it. In the Republic, justice begins with harmony within the individual. Most people think of justice as something that happens between people. Plato made the idea far more intimate. He argued that a person can be unjust toward himself when the different parts of his character fall into disorder. Reason may understand what is best, yet appetite demands immediate satisfaction. Anger may then join whichever side serves it most strongly. Plato thought a well-ordered person resembles a well-ordered community. Each part performs its proper role without trying to dominate everything else. Justice therefore becomes a condition of inner organization. This helps explain one of Plato's most surprising claims. Doing wrong harms the person who does it, even if the victim never retaliates. The damage occurs because wrongdoing strengthens the wrong ruler within the self. Greed trains appetite to demand more authority. Cowardice can teach fear to overpower judgment. Habit gradually creates a political structure inside the personality. Plato's view turns ethical choices into acts of self-government. Every decision is effectively a vote for which part of you should hold power next time. A just life is not merely about following rules. It is about creating an internal order that allows the whole person to function well. Desire becomes dangerous when it overrules both reason and good judgment. Plato did not believe wanting things was automatically bad. Hunger keeps us alive. Attraction helps human relationships form. Ambition can push people toward difficult achievements. Trouble begins when desire stops accepting limits. A person may understand perfectly well that an action will damage his future and still feel pulled toward it. Plato saw this as evidence that the mind is not a single unified voice. One part can make a judgment while another part resists it. This insight allowed him to explain a familiar human experience that simpler theories struggle with. We sometimes do exactly what we believe we should not do. Plato compared good internal government to a hierarchy where reason sees the larger picture and desire accepts appropriate guidance. The goal was not constant suppression. Healthy desires could be satisfied at the right time and in the right measure. The danger was allowing immediate appetite to decide what counts as good. Once that happens, whatever feels strongest in the moment can rewrite our priorities. Plato's warning remains practical. The ability to want something intensely is not evidence that obtaining it will make your life better. Plato divided the human soul into three competing sources of motivation. The Republic offers one of the earliest influential models of a divided mind. Plato identifies reason, appetite, and what he calls spirit. Each pushes us toward different kinds of action. Appetite seeks bodily satisfaction and material pleasure. Reason tries to understand what is genuinely best. Spirit is harder to translate because it includes pride, anger, courage, and the desire for recognition. Plato believed we can detect these parts through conflict. Someone may desperately want a drink while simultaneously deciding not to have it. A third reaction might appear as anger at his own weakness. Instead of treating this as one mind changing its opinion rapidly, Plato saw competing motivational forces at work. The model is ancient, but its basic insight feels psychologically familiar. Human beings are not always internally consistent. We can want incompatible things at the same time. Plato's solution was organization rather than elimination. Appetite has legitimate functions. Spirit supplies energy and determination. Reason provides direction. A healthy personality emerges when these forces cooperate under intelligent guidance. The model transformed ethics because virtue became partly a question of psychological structure rather than simply a list of permitted and forbidden actions. Reason should guide the soul rather than simply serve its appetites. Intelligence alone did not impress Plato. A clever person can use remarkable mental ability to pursue destructive goals. Someone skilled at persuasion can manipulate others more effectively. Someone talented with money can become better at feeding endless greed. Plato therefore distinguished between reason as a servant and reason as a ruler. When reason serves appetite, it asks only how to obtain what desire has already chosen. When reason governs, it asks a more difficult question. Is the thing being desired actually worth having? This distinction changes the meaning of wisdom. Wisdom is not merely the ability to solve problems efficiently. It includes choosing problems and goals that deserve our effort. Plato believed reason could examine consequences beyond the present moment. It could compare competing desires and understand how one choice affects the shape of an entire life. That wider view made it suited to leadership within the soul. His argument also explains why brilliant people can behave foolishly. Intelligence does not guarantee good judgment if it has surrendered authority to craving. A highly sophisticated mind may simply become an extremely effective employee, working for a very poor master. Spirited emotion can become reason's ally when properly educated. Plato noticed that human beings possess a force that is neither calm reasoning nor ordinary appetite. We become angry when treated unfairly. We feel shame after failing our own standards. We defend people or principles even when doing so brings no obvious pleasure. He called this part of the soul thumos, which is often translated as spirit. Its importance becomes clear in moments of temptation. Reason may know that a desire should be resisted, but knowledge alone can feel weak. Spirit supplies emotional force. A person can become angry at his own cowardice and use that anger to act courageously. Plato compared this relationship to a political alliance. Spirit can support reason in governing appetite, but only if it has been educated properly. Without guidance, the same force can become aggressive or obsessed with status. This is why Plato considered character formation so important. Emotions do not simply need suppression. They can be trained to respond to the right things. A person who learns to feel pride in self-control gains an internal ally. Plato therefore anticipated an insight that remains powerful today. Lasting discipline becomes easier when emotion supports what reason already knows. Inner conflict helped Plato explain why people act against better judgment. There is a strange experience almost everyone recognizes. You can know that something is bad for you and still do it. Earlier Greek thinkers sometimes treated wrongdoing mainly as ignorance. Plato developed a more complex explanation. A person may genuinely understand one course of action, while another part of the personality pulls in the opposite direction. The Republic illustrates this through the story of Leontius. While walking outside Athens, he notices dead bodies lying near an executioner. He feels disgust and wants to turn away, yet another impulse desperately wants to look. For a moment he struggles against himself. Then curiosity wins, and he rushes toward the sight while angrily blaming his own eyes. Plato used this disturbing little scene because the conflict is unmistakable. One person contains opposing motivations at the same moment. The example gave philosophical language to weakness of will. Our failures do not always come from lacking information. Sometimes we possess the right judgment but lack the internal order needed to follow it. That changes the problem of self-improvement. Learning what is right matters, but becoming capable of acting on that knowledge is a separate achievement. The Ring of Gyges asks whether anyone remains just without consequences. Plato introduces a thought experiment that still feels dangerous because it removes the fear of being caught. A shepherd named Gyges discovers a ring that makes him invisible. Once hidden from every witness, he seduces a queen, kills a king, and takes the throne. The story is not really about magic. It is about what happens when reputation disappears from morality. Galkin argues that most people behave justly only because they fear punishment or disgrace. Give someone perfect secrecy, and the mask may fall away. Plato therefore asks us to imagine justice under the harshest possible test. If nobody could know what you had done, would goodness still matter? The challenge becomes even more unsettling because the unjust person can now enjoy wealth and status while appearing completely respectable. Plato uses the ring to separate inner character from public image. The invisible man becomes a test of what truly governs a person. Law can control behavior when eyes are watching. Character is what remains when nobody is there to see. Galkin challenges Socrates to prove that justice is valuable in itself. Galkin is not satisfied with easy praise of morality. He wants Socrates to show that justice is worth choosing even when it brings no reward. To make the argument harder, he imagines two extreme lives. The perfectly unjust person commits wrongdoing while maintaining an excellent reputation. The perfectly just person does the opposite. He behaves well but is falsely condemned by everyone around him. If justice only matters because it brings praise, the unjust life appears superior. Galkin is forcing Socrates to defend morality without relying on reputation or practical advantage. This changes the entire direction of the Republic. The question is no longer whether justice helps society function. It becomes whether justice changes the inner condition of the person who possesses it. Plato responds by constructing his famous comparison between the city and the soul. He wants to show that justice produces order within a human being. Gorkon's challenge is powerful because it strips away every comfortable excuse. If goodness costs you status and wrongdoing brings success, what reason remains to choose the better life? Thrasymachus claims justice usually serves whoever possesses political power. One of Plato's most explosive characters enters the Republic with a brutally simple theory. Justice, he says, is whatever benefits the stronger. Governments make laws that protect their own interests, then call obedience to those laws just. A democracy writes democratic laws. A tyranny writes tyrannical ones. In every case, the ruling group defines morality in ways that preserve its position. Thrasymachus is not asking how government should work. He is describing what he thinks power actually does. That makes his argument feel startlingly modern. Laws may be presented as neutral while quietly protecting the people who created them. Public language can hide private advantage. Socrates challenges the theory by asking whether rulers can make mistakes about what benefits them. Thrasymachus keeps adjusting his position, but the suspicion remains. Plato has introduced a political idea that never really disappears from history. Whenever someone asks who benefits from a law or who controls the meaning of justice, the shadow of Thrasymachus is nearby. Socrates replies that genuine leadership should benefit those being governed. Socrates answers the cynical theory of power by changing what leadership means. A true craft, he argues, serves the thing placed under its care. Medicine exists for the health of the patient rather than the advantage of the doctor. Navigation exists to bring passengers safely through danger rather than simply enrich the captain. By the same logic, political skill should serve the governed. If a ruler uses power purely for personal gain, Socrates would say he is not practicing the craft of ruling properly. He is exploiting it. This distinction sounds idealistic, but it creates a demanding standard. Holding office does not automatically make someone a genuine leader. Authority can be real, while leadership is corrupt. Plato therefore separates the possession of power from the proper use of power. The person in charge may still fail at the very activity he claims to perform. This idea becomes central to the Republic. Leadership is not defined by obedience from below. It is defined by whether those above are actually improving the lives placed in their care. Plato compared a badly governed soul with a badly governed city. For Plato, politics and psychology were connected by the same basic question: who should rule? In a city, different groups compete for influence. Inside a person, different motives compete for control. This allowed Plato to describe political systems as reflections of character. A disciplined society resembled a disciplined individual. A chaotic society resembled someone pulled in many directions by competing desires. He develops this comparison through several political types. One personality becomes obsessed with honor. Another becomes dominated by money. Another follows whatever desire appears strongest in the moment. The worst condition belongs to the tyrannical soul, where one destructive passion overwhelms everything else. Plato's comparison makes politics deeply personal. A society cannot be understood only by studying laws or institutions. It also reflects the kinds of people those institutions produce and reward. The same principle works in reverse. A person carries a small political system within himself. Habits become rulers. Desires become factions. Judgment becomes authority. Plato's unsettling suggestion is that political disorder may begin long before anyone enters government. It can begin inside ordinary human character. Democracy receives one of ancient philosophy's most famous Platonic criticisms. Plato knew democracy from direct experience, and his judgment was severe. He worried that political equality could encourage people to treat all opinions as equally wise. In his view, governing a city required knowledge just as other difficult crafts required training. Yet democratic systems could allow persuasive speakers to gain power without understanding what would genuinely benefit citizens. Plato compared this problem to running a ship through argument rather than navigation skill. The loudest sailors fight for control, while the true navigator is dismissed as useless because he studies the stars and understands the sea. Plato's criticism was shaped by Athenian events, including the condemnation of Socrates. He had watched public judgment produce decisions he considered disastrous. His concern was not simply that ordinary people were unintelligent. It was that political systems could reward confidence over competence. Democracy could become vulnerable to flattery because leaders learned that pleasing voters was easier than educating them. Plato's attack remains controversial, but its central question still matters. Should political authority follow popularity, or should it require demonstrated knowledge about the consequences of power? Excessive freedom, Plato warned, can eventually produce a desire for tyranny. Plato describes democracy as attractive because it offers variety and personal freedom. People choose different ways of living, and authority becomes less rigid. Yet he believed this strength could become dangerous when freedom itself becomes the highest value. If every restraint is treated as oppression, discipline begins to look suspicious. Teachers may fear students. Parents may fear children. Citizens may refuse any authority that limits immediate choice. Plato then imagines a political reaction. When disorder becomes exhausting, people begin searching for someone strong enough to restore control. A popular leader appears and promises protection. He identifies enemies, presents himself as the defender of ordinary citizens, and gradually gathers more power. The person who arrives as a champion of freedom can become a tyrant. Plato's sequence is disturbing because tyranny does not necessarily begin with people openly asking for dictatorship. It can emerge from frustration inside a society that has lost confidence in restraint. His argument is not a prediction that every democracy must collapse. It is a warning that political freedom requires self-control if it is going to survive itself. Tyrants appear powerful while becoming slaves to their own appetites. Plato turns the image of the tyrant upside down. From the outside, this person seems to possess maximum freedom. He can take wealth, punish enemies, and satisfy desires that ordinary people must restrain. Yet Plato argues that such a life is internally miserable. A tyrant cannot trust anyone because everyone around him has reasons to fear or flatter him. He becomes suspicious of friends and dependent on guards. More importantly, his strongest desire keeps demanding new satisfaction. What once felt thrilling becomes ordinary, so he needs more. Power does not calm appetite. It expands the territory appetite can consume. Plato therefore calls the tyrannical person a slave, despite his authority over others. He is ruled by the part of himself least capable of knowing when enough is enough. This psychological portrait makes tyranny more than a political problem. Anyone can experience a smaller version of it. The person who cannot refuse a craving may be free in public while imprisoned in private. Plato's paradox is sharp. The ability to do anything you want can become the inability to stop wanting. Political corruption begins when rulers pursue private advantage over common good. Plato believed the purpose of political authority was to improve the whole community. Corruption begins when that purpose is quietly replaced. A ruler may still speak about justice while making decisions that protect wealth, status, or allies. The institution remains visible, but its direction has changed. Plato was especially suspicious of systems where rulers possessed strong private incentives, because those incentives could compete with public responsibility. His solution in the Republic was extreme. The guardian class would live under restrictions designed to reduce opportunities for personal enrichment. Whether that arrangement could ever work is another question. The important insight lies in the conflict itself. Power creates access to resources, and access creates temptation. A leader can gradually stop seeing government as a responsibility and begin treating it as property. Plato understood corruption as more than illegal behavior. It was a change in what ruling was for. Once private gain becomes the real goal, public language can continue while public service disappears. That is why Plato cared so much about the character of rulers before they ever reached positions of authority. Philosopher kings must understand goodness before being trusted with power. Plato's ideal ruler needs more than intelligence. A brilliant strategist who does not understand what is worth pursuing can become extraordinarily dangerous. This is why the philosopher king must ultimately grasp what Plato calls the good. The idea sits at the highest point of the Republic's educational system. Knowledge of mathematics and argument prepares the mind, but the final goal is understanding the standard by which every other choice should be judged. Plato believed rulers constantly face competing goods. Wealth may help a city while damaging equality. Military strength may protect citizens while encouraging aggression. Popular policies may bring immediate pleasure while creating long-term harm. Without a higher measure, leaders simply chase whatever seems useful at the moment. The good is supposed to provide orientation. It allows rulers to ask not only whether something works, but whether the goal itself deserves to be achieved. Plato makes political wisdom dependent on moral vision. This is one reason his ideal government is so demanding. He does not want the smartest people in charge. He wants people whose intelligence has been transformed by understanding what human life is actually for. Plato's ideal rulers were expected to live without ordinary private wealth. Plato worried that money could quietly redirect political loyalty. His solution for the guardian class was startling. Those responsible for governing and defending the ideal city would not live like wealthy elites. They would have limited private possessions and receive what they needed from the community. Plato wanted to remove the temptation to turn public office into a path toward personal enrichment. If rulers could accumulate land, luxury, and fortunes, their decisions might gradually serve those interests. He feared that political leaders could become a separate economic class with motives different from the people they governed. The arrangement was also meant to create shared identity among the guardians themselves. Their lives would be organized around service rather than inheritance. Plato understood that this came at a significant personal cost, which is partly the point. The people trusted with the greatest power should not be the ones most eager to profit from it. Modern societies use different mechanisms to manage conflicts of interest, but the underlying suspicion is ancient. Plato saw wealth and authority as a dangerous combination because both can magnify the same human weakness. Women could become guardians when they possessed the abilities required. For an ancient Greek writer, Plato makes a surprisingly radical argument. In the Republic, he says women should receive the same kind of guardian education when they possess the appropriate natural abilities. His reasoning is based on function rather than convention. If a woman can perform the work required of a guardian, her sex should not automatically exclude her. Plato compares the issue to other differences between people that do not determine occupation. A bald man and a long-haired man may differ physically, but that does not mean one can be a shoemaker while the other cannot. He applies the same logic to political and military roles. Plato still accepts some assumptions about differences between men and women that modern readers would reject, but his conclusion cuts against the expectations of his society. Women in classical Athens had extremely limited public political power. Plato imagined some of them receiving advanced education and participating in government. The proposal shows how his ideal city allowed philosophical argument to challenge custom. If a tradition could not explain why ability should be ignored, Plato was willing to question the tradition itself. Children in Plato's guardian class received carefully controlled public education. Plato believed the earliest years of life were politically important because character begins forming before children can analyze what they are absorbing. For the future guardians, education would therefore be supervised by the city from the beginning. Stories mattered because children imitate heroes before they understand philosophy. Plato worried that tales portraying gods as dishonest or uncontrolled could teach young listeners to admire the wrong behavior. He was willing to censor traditional poetry for this reason. The proposal can sound authoritarian because it clearly limits cultural freedom. Yet Plato's concern reveals a deeper theory about influence. People are shaped by repeated examples long before they can consciously defend or reject them. A society that ignores childhood formation may later discover that adults have developed habits no law can easily correct. Plato wanted future rulers surrounded by models of courage, restraint, and responsibility from their earliest years. He treated education as the slow construction of character rather than the late transmission of information. The unsettling implication is that every culture already educates children somehow, even when nobody has deliberately designed the lesson. Music mattered because Plato believed habits of feeling shape character. Plato gave music an importance that can surprise modern readers. He thought rhythm and melody could train emotional responses before rational argument became possible. A child might not understand a philosophical definition of courage, yet repeated exposure to certain artistic patterns could influence what felt noble or shameful. Plato therefore treated musical education as part of moral education. He worried that changing musical conventions could gradually change character and eventually political life. To modern ears, that can sound exaggerated. Yet the basic idea is familiar. Music can intensify emotion, create identity, and make certain moods feel natural. Plato's concern was not simply whether psalms contained bad messages. He believed form itself could train the soul. Certain patterns encouraged discipline while others encouraged emotional excess. His restrictions were severe because he viewed culture as psychologically active rather than harmless entertainment. The debate he started has never disappeared. Every generation argues about whether popular music influences behavior or merely reflects it. Plato would have rejected that separation. For him, art and character constantly shape one another, which means culture is always doing more than entertaining the people who consume it. Physical training was meant to strengthen character rather than glorify appearance. The guardians in Plato's ideal city needed strong bodies, but physical training served a larger purpose. He believed exercise could develop courage, endurance, and the ability to tolerate discomfort. Yet he also warned against becoming obsessed with physical toughness. Too much harsh training could make a person aggressive and inflexible. Too little could produce softness and lack of resolve. The goal was balance. Plato paired gymnastics with musical education because he thought each corrected the excesses of the other. Physical discipline gave strength. Cultural formation gave sensitivity and proportion. A guardian needed both because political responsibility required controlled power rather than brute force. This reflects Plato's broader approach to virtue. Qualities that seem good can become destructive when pushed beyond their proper measure. Courage without judgment becomes recklessness. Strength without refinement becomes cruelty. Training the body therefore became another way of training the personality. Plato wanted future leaders who could endure hardship without becoming addicted to domination. His ideal may seem distant from modern fitness culture, but the question remains relevant. Are we training the body merely to look impressive, or are we using physical discipline to become more capable human beings? Mathematics prepared Plato's future philosophers to think beyond changing appearances. Plato valued mathematics because it trains the mind to deal with objects that cannot be perfectly found in ordinary experience. Draw a triangle on a tablet, and its lines will have thickness. Its angles may be slightly imperfect. Yet a geometer can reason about the perfect triangle without needing to see one. Plato considered this remarkable. The mind appears capable of understanding exact relationships that the physical world only approximates. Mathematics therefore became a bridge between sensory experience and philosophical reasoning. Future rulers in the Republic were expected to study it for years because Plato thought it could loosen their dependence on appearances. Numbers do not become more persuasive because a crowd applauds them. A proof does not change because someone powerful dislikes the conclusion. Mathematical study trains a kind of intellectual independence. It forces the learner to follow structure rather than opinion. Plato was not interested in calculation only for practical tasks. He wanted mathematics to change how a person thinks. The discipline could teach future philosophers that truth may remain stable even when everything visible around them seems uncertain or constantly changing. Geometry mattered because abstract reasoning trains attention towards stable truths. Geometry fascinated Plato because it asks the mind to reason about figures that no craftsman can produce perfectly. A physical square always contains tiny irregularities. A geometric square does not. Its properties follow from definition rather than workmanship. This made geometry philosophically important. Plato believed the student learns to move beyond what the eyes happen to show and toward relationships the intellect can grasp with greater precision. In the Republic, geometric study helps prepare future philosophers for questions that cannot be solved through observation alone. It also teaches patience. A diagram may suggest an answer, but the proof has to establish why the answer must be true. That distinction between appearance and necessity mattered deeply to Plato. He wanted thinkers who could resist being misled by surfaces. Ancient traditions later attached the famous phrase about geometry to the entrance of Plato's academy, although the historical evidence for an actual inscription is uncertain. The story endured because it captured something real about his philosophy. Geometry was not merely useful knowledge. It represented a disciplined way of learning to trust reason when appearances were incomplete. Astronomy becomes philosophical when the mind seeks order beyond visible motion. Ancient stargazing could easily remain descriptive. People watched planets move, tracked seasons, and learned patterns useful for calendars. Plato wanted something more. He believed astronomy became intellectually valuable when thinkers searched for the mathematical order underlying what they observed. The visible heavens might look irregular because planets change speed and direction from our viewpoint. Yet Plato suspected rational structure beneath that complexity. This encouraged later astronomers to search for models that could explain celestial motion rather than simply record it. In the Republic, he even warned students not to treat the stars themselves as perfectly accurate diagrams. The heavens are still part of the visible world. Their true value lies in the reasoning they provoke. Plato's approach helped strengthen an extraordinary idea. Nature may be understandable because mathematical order exists beneath confusing appearances. That idea became enormously influential in later science, even though modern astronomy moved far beyond Plato's cosmology. What remains fascinating is the intellectual shift. Looking upward was no longer enough. The real challenge was to ask what hidden structure could make the motions of the sky intelligible to the human mind. Dialectic represented Plato's highest method for testing assumptions through reason. After years of mathematical training, Plato's future philosophers would finally practice dialectic. This was not casual debate. It was a disciplined attempt to uncover the assumptions beneath an argument and then examine whether those assumptions could survive questioning. Mathematics often begins from accepted starting points. Dialectic asks whether the starting points themselves are justified. Plato considered this intellectually dangerous when attempted too early. Young people who learn how to destroy arguments without developing judgment may become cynical. They discover that respected beliefs can be challenged and conclude that nothing deserves respect. For this reason, dialectic came late in the educational process. Mature students were expected to use questioning in search of truth rather than victory. The method reflects Plato's distrust of inherited certainty. A belief can be ancient and still be wrong. A claim can be popular and still rest on contradiction. Dialectic keeps digging until the mind reaches principles that can explain what comes below them. Plato imagined this as the highest exercise of reason because it refuses to leave foundational beliefs unexamined. It asks the question beneath every other question. Why should we accept the assumptions from which our whole argument begins? The divided line ranks different states of understanding from illusion to knowledge. Plato asks readers to imagine a line divided into levels, with each section representing a different way the mind can relate to reality. At the lowest level are images such as shadows and reflections. Above them are the physical things those images represent. Higher still comes mathematical reasoning, where the mind works with abstract relationships. At the highest level lies philosophical understanding, which seeks first principles themselves. The scheme is not simply a ranking of subjects. It describes increasing independence from appearance. Someone can mistake an image for the thing itself. Someone else can know the physical object yet never ask what deeper structure makes understanding possible. Plato believed knowledge becomes stronger as the mind moves from copying toward explanation. The divided line also connects directly with the cave, but it provides a more precise map of intellectual development. We do not simply move from ignorance to knowledge in one step. There are different kinds of partial understanding. Plato's model remains useful because information can be accurate while still shallow. Recognizing something is not the same as understanding why it is true. Plato compared the good to the sun because understanding depends upon it. The sun allows the eyes to see, but Plato uses that ordinary fact to explain something far more difficult. He says the good plays a similar role for the mind. Just as visible objects require light before they can be seen clearly, intelligible things require the good before they can be fully understood. This does not mean goodness is merely one moral rule among others. Plato places it above ordinary objects of knowledge. The good gives direction to understanding because it explains why truth and value matter in the first place. This is one of the most mysterious passages in the Republic. Plato does not offer a simple definition. Instead, he gives an analogy, because the idea seems to sit beyond ordinary explanation. The comparison also reveals why philosophy and ethics cannot be separated in his system. A person who understands many facts but does not understand what is worth pursuing remains incomplete. Knowledge needs orientation. Plato's sun image therefore turns morality into something almost structural. The good is not simply another thing we know. It is what makes the rest of knowledge meaningful. Forms describe realities that particular things imperfectly resemble or participate in. Plato's theory of forms begins with an everyday puzzle. We encounter many different chairs, yet somehow recognize them all as chairs. We see countless acts called just, although none is identical to another. Plato proposed that particular things gain their identity through a relationship with stable realities called forms. The physical world contains changing examples. The forms provide the unchanging standards that make classification and knowledge possible. A beautiful object may lose its beauty. Beauty itself does not age. A just law may later be replaced. Justice itself does not depend on one legal code. Plato's exact meaning remains debated because he describes participation in different ways across his dialogues. Yet the core idea is extraordinary. Reality may have levels, and the most fundamental level may not be physical. This reversed the instinct that visible objects are obviously more real than abstract truths. Plato thought the opposite might be true. Particular things come and go, while the structures that make them intelligible remain. His proposal became one of the central turning points in metaphysics and shaped philosophical debates for more than 2 millennia. Beauty itself is different from every beautiful thing we encounter. A sunset fades. A face changes. A sculpture can be damaged. Yet when people call each of these things beautiful, Plato thinks they are responding to something that cannot be reduced to any single example. In the Symposium, beauty becomes the object of a philosophical ascent. A person may begin by loving one beautiful body. With education, that attraction can expand into recognition that beauty appears in many bodies and then in minds or ways of life. Eventually, the thinker seeks beauty itself. Plato describes this final object as something that does not grow, decay, or depend on viewpoint. The proposal is radical because it treats aesthetic experience as a clue to metaphysics. Particular beauty awakens the mind to a standard that no particular object can completely contain. This helps explain why physical attraction can feel strangely larger than the object that triggers it. Plato believed desire sometimes points beyond itself. We may think we want one beautiful thing, yet what we really seek is the quality that made us recognize beauty there in the first place. Perfect equality cannot simply be identified with approximately equal physical objects. Take 2 sticks of nearly identical length. They may look equal, yet precise measurement will reveal some difference. Plato uses this kind of observation in the Phaedo to raise a strange question. If physical things are never perfectly equal, how do we possess the idea of perfect equality at all? We can judge that 2 objects fall short only because we seem to compare them with a standard more exact than anything our senses provide. Plato treats this as evidence that the mind can grasp realities beyond ordinary experience. The argument becomes part of his theory of recollection, but the immediate puzzle stands on its own. Human beings routinely think with concepts that appear more precise than the world around them. Perfect straightness is another example. No physical line remains perfectly straight at every scale, yet geometry can reason about one without difficulty. Plato saw these concepts as clues that thought does not merely copy sensation. The mind brings something additional to experience. His question remains fascinating because it reaches into mathematics, deception, and the mysterious origin of abstract ideas. Plato used mathematics to illuminate truths untouched by ordinary sensory change. Numbers behave differently from physical objects. 3 stones can be scattered or destroyed, but the relationship expressed by 3 does not suffer damage. A mathematical truth does not age. Plato found this stability philosophically significant. He lived in a world where everything visible seemed subject to change, yet mathematical reasoning could arrive at conclusions that appeared timeless. This offered a model for the kind of certainty philosophy might seek. If geometry could reveal truths independent of imperfect drawings, perhaps ethics and metaphysics could also reach realities deeper than shifting opinion. Plato's admiration for mathematics influenced the entire structure of his thought. He repeatedly uses proportion and numerical order when discussing education and cosmology. Yet he did not think mathematics was the final destination. Mathematicians often accept basic assumptions without examining their ultimate foundation. Philosophy had to go further. Still, mathematics provided compelling evidence that human understanding could escape the instability of immediate experience. Plato saw in it a strange doorway. The mind could discover truths that were not manufactured by perception and did not disappear when physical examples changed. The Phaedo presents philosophy as preparation for facing death without panic. The dialogue takes place during the final hours of Socrates' life. His friends gather around him while the sentence imposed by Athens approaches. Instead of collapsing into fear, Socrates discusses the soul and the meaning of philosophical practice. He argues that philosophers spend their lives learning not to confuse bodily pleasures and fears with the highest good. Death, therefore, becomes the ultimate test of whether philosophy has transformed a person. This does not mean Socrates treats life as worthless. The dialogue explicitly rejects taking death into one's own hands. The point is about attachment. If someone has spent a lifetime searching for truth rather than clinging desperately to comfort, the loss of the body may appear different. Plato makes the setting itself part of the argument. These ideas are not delivered in safety. Socrates speaks while knowing he will soon drink the poison prepared for him. His calmness gives the discussion extraordinary dramatic force. Philosophy is being tested against the oldest human fear. Plato asks whether a life devoted to wisdom can change not only how a person thinks, but how that person meets mortality. Socrates spends his final hours discussing whether the soul survives death. The Phaedo does not give readers a single proof of immortality. Instead, Socrates offers several arguments and allows his companions to challenge them. One begins from opposites and suggests that life and death may emerge from each other in a larger cycle. Another appeals to recollection. Later arguments examine whether the soul resembles invisible and unchanging realities more closely than the body does. The discussion becomes more rigorous as objections appear. Two listeners raise serious doubts, and Socrates does not silence them. He encourages further examination. This creates one of the most remarkable death scenes in philosophy. A condemned man spends his remaining time investigating what death might actually mean. The possibility of survival is not treated as blind consolation. Plato stages it as a problem requiring argument. Eventually, Socrates describes a mythic vision of the afterlife, but even there the dialogue distinguishes philosophical reasoning from imaginative possibility. The final effect is deliberately unresolved. Plato gives reasons for hope while preserving mystery. His teacher dies with confidence, yet the reader is still invited to keep thinking about what consciousness might be. Plato offered several arguments for immortality without pretending the matter was simple. Plato's case for the soul surviving death is not one argument repeated in different language. The Phaedo builds a sequence because each approach reveals a different aspect of the problem. The affinity argument suggests that the soul resembles invisible realities more than it resembles the changing body. The final argument takes another route. Socrates connects the soul with the principle of life itself and argues that what essentially brings life cannot admit its opposite. His companions do not accept everything immediately. They worry that the soul might resemble the harmony produced by a musical instrument. Harmony is invisible, yet it disappears when the instrument breaks. Socrates has to answer that comparison directly. This makes the dialogue unusually intellectually honest. Plato allows objections strong enough to threaten the comforting conclusion. The conversation therefore becomes a model of how to approach mysteries that matter emotionally. Hope alone is not enough. Fear is not evidence either. The possibility of immortality has to survive criticism. Plato may not settle the question, but he shows how philosophical courage differs from simply believing whatever makes death easier to face. Recollection suggests learning may awaken understanding already latent within the soul. Plato proposes one of his strangest ideas through a familiar experience. Sometimes learning feels less like receiving something new and more like recognizing something you somehow already understand. In the Phaedo and Meno, this becomes the theory of recollection. The soul may have encountered truths before birth and forgotten them when entering embodied life. Education then becomes a process of recovering what was lost. Plato uses abstract knowledge to support the possibility. Sensory experience gives us imperfect examples of equality, yet the mind seems capable of judging those examples against perfect equality. Where did that standard come from? Plato suggests the soul knew it before ordinary experience began. The theory carries enormous implications. Human beings may be older than their present lives. Knowledge may not originate entirely in the senses. Philosophical insight may be a form of remembering. Later traditions found spiritual possibilities in this idea because it makes intellectual awakening resemble recovery of a forgotten identity. Plato presents it through argument rather than revelation. The mystery appears inside the ordinary act of learning. Every moment of sudden recognition could be interpreted as evidence that the mind contains more history than conscious memory reveals. In the Meno, an uneducated boy is guided through a geometric discovery. Socrates asks a young enslaved boy who has never studied geometry to solve a problem about doubling the area of a square. At first, the boy gives an obvious but incorrect answer. Socrates does not simply tell him the solution. He draws figures and asks a sequence of questions. Gradually, the boy recognizes his mistake and reaches the correct relationship involving the diagonal. Plato uses the episode to support the theory of recollection. If the boy can arrive at geometric truth without being directly taught the answer, perhaps knowledge is being awakened rather than inserted. Modern readers may explain the scene differently, but the educational method remains striking. Socrates guides discovery by forcing the learner to confront his own reasoning. The boy's confusion is essential because certainty has to collapse before understanding can develop. Plato turns a small geometry lesson into a philosophical experiment about the nature of learning. The demonstration also challenges the assumption that ignorance means emptiness. Someone with no formal education may still possess the capacity to reason toward truths that seem far beyond previous experience. Meno's paradox asks how anyone can search for something entirely unknown. Meno presents Socrates with a puzzle that threatens the entire idea of inquiry. If you already know what you are looking for, there seems to be no reason to search. If you do not know it at all, how could you recognize the answer when you found it? The paradox sounds playful until its force becomes clear. Every investigation begins with incomplete knowledge. How can ignorance successfully guide itself toward truth? Plato responds through recollection, but the puzzle reaches beyond that theory. It identifies something mysterious about curiosity itself. A question somehow points toward an answer that the questioner does not yet possess. Researchers can recognize a better explanation before knowing it in advance. A student can realize that a new idea solves a problem he could not previously define clearly. Plato uses Minos' challenge to show that inquiry requires an intermediate state between total knowledge and total ignorance. We know enough to search while not knowing enough to finish. This tension is the engine of philosophy. The paradox turns learning into something stranger than information gathering. Searching for truth requires us to recognize what we have never fully known. Plato distinguished genuine teaching from simply transferring information into another mind. The image of education as filling a container would have seemed deeply inadequate to Plato. His dialogues rarely show Socrates delivering long packages of knowledge for students to memorize. Instead, the learner is forced to think. A definition is proposed, tested, and often abandoned. This suggests that understanding cannot simply be handed from one person to another. A teacher can create conditions for insight, but the student must perform the act of seeing the connection. Plato's approach changes the role of the educator. The best teacher may not be the person who speaks most clearly about the answer. It may be the person who asks the question that makes the learner discover why the answer must be true. This also explains why intellectual discomfort appears so often in the dialogues. Confusion is not always a teaching failure. It can mark the moment when borrowed certainty begins turning into personal understanding. Plato therefore treats learning as transformation rather than storage. Facts can be repeated without comprehension. Genuine education changes the structure of thought so that a person can reason independently when the teacher is no longer present. The symposium explores love through a sequence of competing philosophical speeches. Plato turns a dinner party into one of philosophy's strangest investigations of desire. A group of prominent Athenians agrees to spend the evening discussing the nature of love. Each speaker offers a different explanation. One treats love as a source of courage. Another connects it with harmony. Another gives a comic myth about human beings searching for their missing halves. Socrates eventually introduces a much more demanding vision. The result is not a single lecture, but a progression in which every speech changes what the word love seems to mean. Plato also lets personality shape philosophy. The speakers reveal themselves through the explanations they prefer. Their theories therefore tell us something about human nature as well as desire. This structure has fascinated readers for centuries because the dialogue feels almost like an intellectual experiment. Plato places several seductive explanations beside one another and lets us notice their strengths and weaknesses. By the end, ordinary romantic attraction has become the starting point for questions about immortality, wisdom, and what human beings are ultimately searching for when they want another person. Aristophanes explains romantic longing with Plato's unforgettable story of divided humans. One of the symposium's most famous speeches begins with a bizarre ancient myth. Aristophanes claims human beings originally had doubled bodies with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces. These powerful creatures became so confident that they challenged the gods. Zeus punished them by splitting each one in half. Ever since, each separated person has wandered through life longing to reunite with the missing half. Plato does not present this as literal history. Aristophanes is a comic playwright inside a philosophical dialogue. Yet the story captures something emotionally recognizable. Romantic love can feel like recognition rather than ordinary attraction. The person may experience another human being as though something missing has suddenly returned. The myth also explains why separation can feel so painful. Love becomes the desire to repair an ancient division. Later parts of the symposium moved beyond this account, but the image became extraordinarily influential. The modern phrase "other half" echoes the same intuition. Plato preserved a story in which intimacy is not simply pleasure or reproduction. It becomes a response to an imagined incompleteness buried at the center of human existence. Diotima teaches Socrates that love ultimately reaches beyond possession of another person. Socrates claims his deepest understanding of love came from a mysterious woman named Diotima. Whether she was historical remains uncertain, but Plato gives her one of the dialogue's most important teachings. She argues that lovers often misunderstand what they truly want. They think they want a beautiful person, yet their deeper desire is to possess the good permanently. This changes love from simple attraction into a search for lasting fulfillment. Human beings know that individual life is temporary, so they search for ways to reach beyond themselves. Some do this through children. Others create laws, poems, achievements, or ideas that may survive them. Diotima therefore links love with the desire for immortality. the beloved person becomes one expression of a much larger hunger. Her teaching also challenges possessiveness. If love ultimately seeks goodness rather than ownership, another person cannot simply become an object to capture. The encounter should awaken development in the lover. Plato transforms romance into a philosophical force that can push human beings beyond immediate gratification. What begins as wanting someone may reveal a deeper wish to participate in something worthwhile that does not vanish when one life ends. The ascent of love moves from particular beauty toward understanding beauty itself. Diotima describes a remarkable progression that later became known as the ladder of love. A person begins by being drawn to one beautiful body. With maturity, the lover recognizes that physical beauty appears in many people and cannot belong exclusively to one individual. Attention then shifts toward beautiful character. From there, the mind becomes interested in beautiful ways of living, and eventually in beautiful forms of knowledge. The final stage is the contemplation of beauty itself. Plato describes this as something stable that does not depend on one face or one moment. The movement does not require hatred of physical attraction. Instead, attraction becomes the first step in an education of desire. The lover gradually discovers that the quality being pursued is larger than the original object. This turns love into a path of intellectual expansion. Desire begins narrowly and becomes capable of recognizing wider forms of value. Later, spiritual traditions found this idea deeply appealing because it suggested that ordinary longing could be redirected toward transcendence. Plato's astonishing proposal is that desire does not have to be silenced before wisdom begins. Properly transformed, desire can become one of wisdom's most powerful engines. Alcibiades arrives drunk and unexpectedly turns the symposium toward Socrates himself. Just when the philosophical speeches seem complete, Plato disrupts the evening. Alcibiades bursts into the gathering intoxicated and wearing a wreath. Instead of delivering another theory of love, he gives a revealing speech about Socrates. Alcibiades is brilliant, wealthy, politically ambitious, and famously attractive. Yet he confesses that Socrates has an almost supernatural ability to unsettle him. He compares Socrates with statues of Silenus that look ridiculous outside but contain divine images within. The comparison captures the contradiction surrounding Plato's teacher. Socrates is physically unimpressive and socially unconventional, yet conversation with him can leave powerful people questioning their entire lives. Alcibiades also describes trying unsuccessfully to seduce him. Socrates refuses to exchange wisdom for physical beauty. The scene reverses ordinary expectations about desire and status. Athens admires Alcibiades, but Alcibiades feels judged by the one man who refuses to admire him on conventional terms. Plato uses the drunken confession to reveal philosophy's personal cost. Socrates does not merely defeat arguments. He makes people see the distance between the lives they are living and the lives they know they could live. Socrates appears remarkably resistant to wealth, seduction, hardship, and social approval. Plato repeatedly presents Socrates as someone whose priorities seem almost impossible to manipulate. Money has little obvious hold over him. Physical discomfort barely changes his behavior. During military campaigns, he reportedly endured cold and exhaustion with unusual resilience. Alcibiades describes him standing motionless in thought for an entire day and night, while others watched in amazement. He could drink heavily without appearing drunk, yet he was not portrayed as dependent on alcohol. Attractive admirers failed to redirect his values. Public hostility eventually failed as well. This combination made Socrates unsettling because ordinary methods of influence seemed ineffective against him. someone who cannot easily be bribed, seduced, frightened, or flattered, is difficult to control. Plato turns this independence into evidence of philosophical training. Socrates has not eliminated bodily needs, but they do not seem to determine his decisions. His example gives philosophy a practical test. A theory of self-mastery means little if comfort still governs every choice. Plato presents his teacher as a man whose convictions have entered his habits so deeply that circumstances struggle to move him away from what he thinks is right. The Phaedrus compares the soul to a charioteer controlling two horses. Plato gives the inner life one of its most memorable symbolic models. The soul resembles a winged chariot driven by a charioteer. The driver represents reason, while two horses pull with very different temperaments. One is disciplined and responsive. The other is unruly and difficult to control. The image explains why human beings can feel torn between incompatible impulses, even when they know which direction they want to travel. The charioteer cannot simply destroy either horse because both belong to the vehicle. His task is coordination. Plato then places this psychological struggle inside a much larger myth about souls following the gods and glimpsing ultimate reality before birth. When the horses fall into disorder, the soul loses its wings and descends into embodied life. The story connects desire with memory and spiritual ascent. Some readers take it as mythic psychology rather than literal cosmology. Either way, the model remains powerful because self-control becomes skilled guidance rather than simple repression. Human nature contains forces that pull differently. Wisdom means learning how to direct those forces toward a destination the whole person can ultimately endorse. One horse represents disciplined aspiration, while the other pulls toward unruly desire. The two horses in Plato's chariot are not merely good desire and bad desire. Their contrast reveals two different ways emotion can relate to reason. The noble horse responds to shame, honor, and restraint. It can be guided without constant force. The unruly horse pushes toward immediate gratification and ignores consequences. Plato dramatizes the conflict through erotic attraction. When the soul encounters someone beautiful, both horses respond. One respects the beloved and accepts discipline. The other wants possession immediately. The charioteer must struggle to prevent desire from taking control. The scene is intentionally intense because Plato wants to show self-mastery as an active achievement. Reason does not automatically win simply because it understands what should happen. It needs practice and support from better trained emotions. Eventually, the unruly horse can become more obedient through repeated correction. This gives the myth a surprisingly practical message. Character develops through repeated internal victories. A difficult impulse may not disappear, but its authority can weaken. Plato suggests that freedom is not having only convenient desires. Freedom is developing enough internal order that a powerful desire no longer gets to decide what you do. Plato argued that love can become a powerful path toward philosophical awakening. In the Phaedrus, falling in love can trigger something far stranger than ordinary romance. Plato suggests that beauty encountered in another person can awaken a buried memory of realities the soul once knew. The lover may therefore experience intense emotion because the visible person has reminded him of something beyond the visible world. This explains why attraction can feel overwhelming or mysteriously significant. The experience is dangerous because desire can collapse into possession. Yet if handled properly, love can redirect attention upward. The lover begins caring about the beloved's character and wants both people to become better. Romantic intensity is transformed into shared philosophical development. Plato even calls this state a form of divine madness. Ordinary madness damages judgment, but certain inspired states may break through the limits of conventional thinking. poetry, and prophecy can also belong to this unusual category. Love becomes the most personal version because another human being acts as the catalyst. Plato therefore refuses to treat passion as simply irrational. A force capable of destabilizing the mind can also awaken it. The same energy that creates obsession may become an invitation to seek something higher than possession. Written words, Plato suggested, cannot answer questions when readers misunderstand them. Plato identifies a weakness in writing that remains obvious even in a world filled with books and screens. A written statement says the same thing to every reader. If someone misunderstands it, the page cannot notice. If a reader asks for clarification, the words remain silent. Socrates compares written language to a painting. The figures look alive, but ask them a question, and they give no response. Living conversation behaves differently. A skilled teacher can adjust an explanation after seeing confusion. He can challenge one person more strongly and slow down for another. Plato therefore worried that written words might create the appearance of understanding without genuine comprehension. Someone can memorize sentences and repeat them without knowing how to defend what they mean. This criticism is especially intriguing because Plato himself became one of history's greatest writers. His chosen form may partly answer the problem. Dialogues imitate conversation and force readers to follow arguments rather than merely collect doctrines. Even so, the limitation remains. Once a text leaves its author, interpretation becomes unpredictable. Plato recognized very early that information can travel farther than understanding, and those two things should never be confused. A famous Egyptian story in the Phaedrus questions whether writing strengthens memory. Socrates tells a story about the Egyptian god Thuth presenting the invention of writing to King Thamus. Thuth proudly claims that writing will improve wisdom and memory. The king gives the opposite judgment. He predicts that people will rely on external marks and gradually stop exercising their own memory. Writing will provide reminders, not true recollection. Worse still, readers may acquire large amounts of information and begin believing they are wise without actually understanding what they have learned. Plato places this warning in an ancient setting, but it sounds uncannily relevant whenever new information technology appears. Search engines and digital storage create a similar question. Does easier access to knowledge strengthen the mind, or simply move memory outside it? Plato does not deny that writing is useful. The story focuses on what may be lost when a tool replaces an internal ability. It also distinguishes possessing information from becoming wise. A person surrounded by texts can still think poorly. The Egyptian tale, therefore, turns technology into a philosophical problem. Every tool that extends human memory may also change what human beings bother to remember for themselves. Plato used written dialogues while making one of history's earliest critiques of writing. The contradiction seems impossible to miss. Plato distrusts writing, yet almost everything we know about his philosophy comes from texts he carefully composed. This may be deliberate. His dialogues rarely behave like instruction manuals. They contain interruptions, uncertainty, jokes, dramatic settings, and arguments that resist simple summary. Instead of writing a fixed system under his own name, Plato creates conversations that make readers think through competing positions. Perhaps this was his way of designing texts that knew they could never replace living philosophy. A dialogue can provoke questioning even though it cannot literally answer the reader. Plato also avoids presenting himself as the authoritative speaker. We hear Socrates and dozens of other characters, while Plato stays hidden. This makes it difficult to convert his works into a simple collection of doctrines. Some scholars have even wondered whether Plato deliberately left his deepest teachings unwritten, although the evidence remains debated. Whatever the answer, the tension is fascinating. One of civilization's greatest authors seems deeply aware that writing can freeze thought. He therefore uses writing to create an experience that repeatedly pushes beyond the written page and back toward active reasoning. The Apology presents Socrates defending his entire way of life before Athens. Socrates stands before an Athenian jury knowing that the verdict could cost him his life. He has been accused of corrupting the young and failing to respect the city's gods. Yet his defense is unlike what most defendants would attempt. He does not flatter the jury. He does not bring his children forward to provoke sympathy. Instead, he explains why questioning his fellow citizens is a duty he cannot abandon. Socrates compares himself to a gadfly sent to awaken a large but sluggish horse. Athens may find him irritating, yet the irritation serves a purpose. He challenges people who care intensely about wealth and reputation while neglecting the condition of their character. Socrates even says that if the court offered freedom on the condition that he stop philosophizing, he would refuse. Plato thereby transforms a legal defense into a declaration of intellectual independence. The trial asks whether philosophy should adapt itself to public approval when truth becomes unpopular. Socrates accepts the possibility of death rather than surrender the practice that gives his life meaning. The result became one of history's defining images of principled dissent. Socrates insists that avoiding wrongdoing matters more than avoiding death. Most people treat survival as one of the strongest reasons for action. Socrates refuses to make it absolute. During his trial, he argues that fear of death often depends on pretending to know something nobody truly knows. Death might be terrible, but it might also be a profound good. Wrongdoing is different. Socrates believes he does know that deliberately acting unjustly damages character. Therefore, he would rather face an uncertain death than commit a known wrong to escape it. This principle had already guided him during dangerous political episodes. Under one regime, authorities ordered him to participate in the arrest of a man named Leon. Socrates refused, even though disobedience could have endangered him. In the Apology, he presents such choices as evidence that his values are not merely theoretical. Philosophy must survive contact with fear. His position turns conventional prudence upside down. Protecting the body is not automatically the highest priority. Preserving moral integrity can matter more. Plato gives the idea enormous force because Socrates is not discussing a hypothetical danger. He is making the argument while a real sentence of death hangs over him. The examined life requires testing what we assume about ourselves. Socrates' famous commitment to examination is often reduced to introspection. But Plato presents something much more demanding. Examining a life means questioning the beliefs that direct it. What do you think success is? Why do you admire certain people? Which fears control your choices? Socrates approaches these questions by testing definitions and exposing contradictions. The aim is not endless self-analysis. It is discovering whether the principles guiding your life can survive rational scrutiny. This creates a strange possibility. Someone can be highly successful at reaching goals that were never worth pursuing. Without examination, efficiency may simply help a person travel faster in the wrong direction. Socrates therefore treats questioning as a form of moral maintenance. Assumptions accumulate quietly because families, communities, and ambitions hand them to us before we learn to inspect them. Philosophy interrupts that inheritance. It asks whether the life we are building was consciously chosen or merely absorbed. Plato's challenge remains uncomfortable because examination can threaten identity. A belief may support years of decisions. Discovering that it is weak means facing the possibility that part of one's life rests on an assumption that was never properly tested. Crito shows Socrates refusing an escape that his friends could arrange. After the trial, Socrates waits in prison for his execution. his wealthy friend Crito arrives with an escape plan. Money is available. Supporters are prepared to help. Socrates could leave Athens and live elsewhere. Instead of accepting immediately, he asks whether escaping would be just. Crito appeals to friendship and reputation. He worries people will think Socrates' companions were too cheap to save him. Socrates dismisses that concern because public opinion cannot decide what is right. The dialogue then imagines the laws of Athens speaking directly to Socrates. They argue that he has lived under the city's institutions for decades and accepted their benefits. To destroy their authority when a judgment turns against him would create a contradiction. Modern readers often disagree with this reasoning, especially because the verdict itself appears unjust. That tension makes the dialogue fascinating. Socrates does not claim that whatever the state does must be morally correct. He asks whether responding to injustice with another wrong would improve anything. Plato turns an available prison escape into a test of consistency. Principles matter most when abandoning them suddenly becomes convenient. Obedience to law becomes complicated when the state itself acts unjustly. Plato inherited a problem from Socrates that political philosophy has never fully escaped. Citizens need laws because social life becomes unstable when everyone obeys only rules they personally approve. Yet governments can make terrible decisions. What should a good person do when law and conscience collide? Socrates gives apparently different answers in different situations. When authorities ordered him to participate in an unjust arrest, he refused. When a court imposed an unjust death sentence on him, he declined to escape. The distinction seems to depend partly on what action would require him to do. He would not actively commit injustice against another person. Yet he also resisted undermining the legal order for his own benefit. This creates a difficult middle position between blind obedience and total individual freedom. Plato does not give readers a simple formula. Instead, he shows why political duty becomes morally dangerous at its edges. Laws deserve respect because communities depend on them, but legality alone cannot transform wrongdoing into goodness. The problem remains alive whenever conscience confronts authority. Plato's contribution was to make the conflict impossible to solve with slogans. Euthyphro asks whether goodness depends upon divine approval. Outside the courthouse where Socrates will face charges involving religion, he meets Euthyphro. The setting could hardly be more appropriate. Euthyphro claims to understand holiness so confidently that he is prosecuting his own father. Socrates asks him for a definition. Eventually, the conversation produces one of philosophy's most famous dilemmas. Is something holy because the gods approve it, or do the gods approve it because it is holy? If goodness exists only because divine beings command it, morality can appear arbitrary. If they approve goodness because it is already good, then goodness seems to possess a standard independent of divine approval. Plato develops the problem within Greek polytheism, yet later philosophers applied versions of it to monotheistic religion. The question reaches deeply into the relationship between morality and God. Can an action become good solely because it is commanded? Or does a perfectly good deity command actions because their goodness is somehow meaningful already? Plato leaves the dialogue unresolved. Euthyphro eventually walks away before producing a definition that survives examination. The unfinished ending makes the problem more powerful because readers inherit the question instead of receiving an official answer. Plato's dialogues often end without resolving the question that began them. A reader expecting philosophy to provide neat conclusions can find Plato strangely frustrating. Several dialogues finish in a state called aporia. The word describes puzzlement or being at a loss. Characters may spend an entire conversation investigating courage or knowledge, only to discover that every proposed definition has failed. Plato could easily have supplied a final paragraph with the correct answer. He often refuses. This suggests that the experience of intellectual failure is part of the teaching. A person who begins confidently may discover that his certainty rested on assumptions he never examined. Ending in confusion prevents him from returning comfortably to the original belief. Something has changed, even though no replacement doctrine has appeared. Plato understood that false certainty can be harder to overcome than ignorance. A tidy answer might simply become another slogan to repeat. An unresolved dialogue keeps the question alive inside the reader. This also explains why Plato remains difficult to turn into a simple system. His works often function less like textbooks and more like carefully designed encounters. The reader is pushed toward philosophy because the text deliberately refuses to finish the thinking on our behalf. Confusion can represent philosophical progress when false certainty has been removed. Most education treats confusion as a problem to eliminate quickly. Socrates often treats it as evidence that something important has finally happened. In the Meno, his questioning leaves Meno feeling mentally numb. Meno compares Socrates with a torpedo fish that shocks anyone who touches it. Socrates accepts the comparison with an important qualification. He claims that he creates confusion because he is confused himself. The point is not humiliation. It is clearing away confidence that was never deserved. Before the conversation, Meno thinks he understands virtue. After several failed definitions, he recognizes that the subject is difficult. Plato considers the second state intellectually superior. The person who knows he has a problem can investigate. The person who mistakenly believes the problem is solved will not. This gives philosophical uncertainty a positive role. Losing an answer can be genuine advancement when the answer was wrong. Modern culture often rewards immediate opinions, which makes Plato's lesson especially provocative. Wisdom may sometimes begin with the courage to remain uncertain. A mind that says, "I do not know yet," can be closer to truth than a mind that confidently repeats an explanation it has never tested. Protagoras examines whether virtue can actually be taught to another person. The dialogue places Socrates against Protagoras, one of the most famous professional intellectuals in Greece. Protagoras claims he can improve young men by teaching political excellence. Socrates immediately sees a problem. If virtue can be taught, why do accomplished statesmen sometimes fail to pass their excellence to their own children? Protagoras responds with a fascinating account of civilization. He argues that political virtue is taught everywhere because societies could not survive without it. Parents teach children. Laws punish wrongdoing. Communities constantly reward acceptable behavior. The teaching is so widespread that people stop noticing it. Plato then complicates the issue further by asking whether courage, justice, wisdom, and moderation are separate virtues or different expressions of something unified. The conversation becomes a battle over what moral education really involves. Is becoming good similar to learning a technical skill, or does it require a deeper transformation of understanding? The dialogue refuses an easy conclusion. By the end, Socrates and Protagoras appear surprisingly close to positions they initially resisted. Plato turns the question back on the reader. If character can be taught, what exactly would a genuine teacher of goodness need to know? Gorgias distinguishes persuasion that flatters audiences from knowledge that improves them. Plato was deeply suspicious of rhetoric when it became detached from truth. In the Gorgias, Socrates questions professional speakers who can persuade large audiences about subjects they do not genuinely understand. A skilled rhetorician might convince citizens about medicine more effectively than an actual doctor. That power fascinates and alarms Socrates. He compares bad rhetoric with cookery. Delicious food can please a patient while doing nothing for health. Medicine may feel unpleasant while producing real improvement. In the same way, a political speaker can tell audiences what they enjoy hearing rather than what would make them better citizens. Plato calls this flattery. The danger lies in confusing pleasure with expertise. Someone who makes us feel good can appear more trustworthy than someone who understands the problem. Plato's criticism reaches far beyond ancient public speaking. Advertising and political messaging can all exploit the same vulnerability. Persuasion is powerful because human beings do not evaluate every claim through careful reasoning. We respond to confidence and emotion. Plato therefore asks a difficult question about communication. Should success be measured by whether people are convinced, or by whether what convinced them was actually worth believing? Callicles argues that conventional morality restrains naturally stronger human beings. The Gorgias becomes more extreme when Callicles enters the debate. He claims ordinary morality was invented by the weak majority to control people who are naturally stronger. Society praises equality because most people fear being dominated by exceptional individuals. According to Callicles, nature itself tells a different story. Stronger animals dominate weaker ones, and powerful states dominate vulnerable neighbors. Why should a superior human being accept rules created by inferiors? He celebrates the person with enormous desires and enough courage or intelligence to satisfy them. Plato gives this argument real force rather than presenting a foolish villain. Callicles voices a temptation that appears repeatedly in political history. Perhaps morality is merely a strategy used by people without power. Perhaps greatness requires breaking conventional restraints. Socrates must therefore defend justice against someone who does not share ordinary assumptions about fairness. The debate becomes a confrontation between two visions of freedom. Callicles identifies freedom with expanding desire and acquiring the power to satisfy it. Socrates argues that this creates dependence rather than greatness. Plato's genius is to let the dangerous position speak clearly enough that readers can understand why ambitious people might find it attractive. Socrates answers that uncontrolled appetite makes a person less free, not more. To answer Callicles, Socrates describes a person trying to fill leaking containers. One life keeps its vessels sound and eventually reaches satisfaction. The other has containers full of holes and must pour into them forever. Callicles prefers the second existence because constant desire provides constant pleasure. Socrates sees it as endless dependence. If happiness requires continuously satisfying new cravings, peace becomes impossible. The person needs another pleasure almost as soon as the last one ends. Plato uses this strange image to challenge the assumption that freedom means unlimited gratification. A person who must obey every appetite cannot rest from serving it. The larger the appetites become, the more effort their satisfaction demands. What looks like abundance can therefore hide a life of perpetual shortage. Socrates does not argue that pleasure has no value. His point is that desire needs structure if pleasure is going to contribute to a good life. Otherwise, satisfaction resembles pouring water into something that can never stay full. Plato's image is ancient, but it describes a surprisingly familiar pattern. The ability to consume endlessly may increase options while quietly reducing the ability to feel that anything is enough. Pleasure and goodness are repeatedly separated throughout Plato's moral philosophy. Plato refuses to accept the attractive idea that whatever feels pleasant must therefore be good. The distinction seems obvious when pleasure produces harmful consequences. Yet he pushes it further. Some experiences feel unpleasant precisely because they improve us. Medical treatment can hurt. Difficult criticism can damage pride while correcting a serious flaw. Training can be exhausting while increasing ability. Meanwhile, immediate pleasure can conceal deterioration. Plato uses these contrasts to force a deeper question. by what standard should experiences be judged if feeling good is not enough? His answer increasingly depends on order and intelligent understanding. A pleasure should be evaluated by the role it plays within an entire life. This prevents morality from becoming a war against enjoyment. Plato sometimes gives pleasure an important place. He simply denies it the authority to define goodness by itself. That distinction matters because pleasure possesses persuasive power. We naturally want to call enjoyable things beneficial. Plato asks us to resist that automatic conclusion. Something can feel rewarding while weakening judgment. Something difficult can strengthen character. The ability to tell the difference becomes one of the central tasks of philosophical self-government. The Philebus investigates whether the best life depends on pleasure or intelligence. Plato stages another competition between two candidates for the good life. One side proposes pleasure. The other proposes knowledge and intelligence. At first, the debate seems as though one must defeat the other. Then, the dialogue changes direction. A life containing nothing but pleasure would lack memory and understanding. Someone experiencing enjoyment without knowing that he was enjoying anything would barely possess a recognizably human life. Yet a life of pure intelligence with no pleasure at all also seems incomplete. Plato therefore begins constructing a mixture. The question becomes, which pleasures and which forms of knowledge deserve inclusion? He distinguishes measured pleasures from those connected with uncontrolled appetite. He also ranks kinds of understanding according to their precision. The surprising conclusion is that the best life is neither pure hedonism nor cold intellect. Goodness emerges through proportion. This reflects a mature feature of Plato's thought. The strongest answer may not lie at either extreme. Human flourishing requires elements that can conflict when isolated, but cooperate when properly ordered. The Philebus, therefore, turns an either-or argument into a problem of composition. Wisdom includes knowing not only what is valuable, but how valuable things should fit together. Plato eventually describes a good life as requiring an ordered mixture. By the time of the Philebus, Plato is exploring balance with remarkable precision. He compares a successful life with a well-made mixture whose ingredients must appear in the right proportion. Intelligence matters because it provides structure. Pleasure matters because human beings are not disembodied minds. Measure becomes crucial because even valuable experiences can become harmful when they expand without limit. Plato therefore introduces the idea that goodness may depend partly on proportion itself. This resembles patterns he sees elsewhere. Music requires direct relationships between tones. Health depends on balance within the body. A stable character requires different motivations to occupy appropriate roles. The good life follows the same principle. More is not automatically better. Greater intensity is not automatically improvement. A life overflowing with one attractive ingredient can become distorted precisely because nothing else can counterbalance it. Plato's mature position is more subtle than the stereotype of a philosopher rejecting ordinary enjoyment. He is asking how human beings can combine pleasure with thought without allowing either to destroy the whole. The result is a practical insight. Flourishing may depend less on maximizing a single good than on learning the difficult art of proportion. Cratylus investigates whether names naturally fit things or arise through convention. Plato devotes an entire dialogue to a question that sounds simple until it begins unraveling. Why do words mean what they mean? Hermogenes argues that names work through agreement. A community could use a different sound for the same object and communicate perfectly well. Cratylus takes the opposite position. He believes correct names somehow belong naturally to the things they identify. Socrates explores both possibilities through elaborate word origins and linguistic speculation. Some of the proposed etymologies are playful and would not survive modern linguistics, but the underlying problem remains serious. Is language merely a human labeling system, or does it reveal something about the structure of reality? Plato eventually becomes suspicious of relying too heavily on names. Words can mislead, because their creators may have misunderstood the things they named. To discover truth, we must investigate reality itself rather than assume language already contains the answer. This creates an intriguing warning. A familiar word can make a concept feel settled when the underlying thing remains mysterious. Plato understood that naming something does not mean we understand it. Language gives thought enormous power, but it can also disguise ignorance behind confident labels. Theaetetus explores knowledge while rejecting several surprisingly modern-sounding definitions. The dialogue begins with what seems like the most basic philosophical question imaginable. What is knowledge? Theaetetus proposes that knowledge is perception. Socrates tests the idea by connecting it with the claim that things are always as they appear to each observer. If honey tastes sweet to one person and bitter to another, perhaps both experiences are equally true. The conversation then becomes a deep investigation of relativism. Plato asks whether perception can explain memory or expertise. If every judgment is true for whoever makes it, why should anyone pay a teacher? The dialogue later considers whether knowledge might instead be true judgment. That fails because someone can accidentally reach a correct conclusion. A final proposal adds an explanatory account, but this also creates problems. The extraordinary thing is that Plato ends without a successful definition. More than 2,000 years later, philosophers still debate closely related questions about justification and belief. The Theaetetus therefore feels startlingly unfinished in the best possible way. Plato demonstrates how difficult it is to define something we rely on constantly. We say I know every day, yet explaining exactly what separates knowledge from error remains surprisingly elusive. Perception alone cannot explain everything Plato believed genuine knowledge requires. Plato asks us to notice that the senses provide experiences without automatically interpreting them. Eyes see colors. Ears hear sounds. Yet the mind performs comparisons that no single sense seems able to make alone. We can judge that a sound and a color are different. We can recognize that two perceived things both exist. We can think about sameness or difference, even though these concepts are not delivered directly through one sensory organ. In the Theaetetus, this becomes an argument that knowing cannot simply equal perceiving. The mind contributes something active. It compares and judges what sensory experience provides. Plato also points toward the problem of error. A person can see something correctly and still reach a false conclusion about what it means. Sensation therefore supplies material without guaranteeing understanding. The distinction has enormous consequences. If knowledge were nothing more than perception, truth could collapse into whatever happens to appear to someone at a particular moment. Plato wants a standard capable of explaining why some judgments are better than others. His analysis anticipates a problem that remains central to philosophy. Experience gives us access to the world, but understanding requires more than simply receiving impressions. The sophist examines how falsehood is possible without becoming meaningless speech. Plato noticed a strange problem hidden inside an ordinary lie. If someone says something false, what exactly are they talking about? Earlier thinkers had argued that speaking about what is not makes no sense, because non-being cannot be anything. But if that were true, false statements would become impossible. Every meaningful sentence would somehow have to be true. In the Sophist, Plato tries to escape this trap by redefining what non-being means. He suggests that saying something is not another thing does not mean describing absolute nothingness. It can mean describing difference. A statement becomes false when it connects things in a way that does not match reality. This may sound technical, but the consequences are enormous. Plato is trying to explain how deception can exist at all. Without a theory of falsehood, there is no clear way to distinguish error from truth. The dialogue, therefore, becomes an investigation into language itself. A lie is not simply empty noise. It is meaningful speech, arranged incorrectly. Plato turns one of the most familiar human behaviors into a deep puzzle about how words can represent a world they sometimes misdescribe. Plato forced philosophy to confront the strange problem of speaking about non-being. The difficulty begins with a seemingly obvious statement. You cannot talk about nothing because the moment you talk about it, you have turned it into something your mind can consider. Earlier philosophers such as Parmenides had made this problem especially severe. Being exists. Non-being does not. Therefore, thought should concern only what is. Plato realized this creates impossible consequences. We routinely say that one thing is not another. We describe fictional creatures that do not exist. We deny statements and identify mistakes. None of this would make sense if every use of not referred to absolute nothingness. The sophist, therefore, introduces a subtle solution. Non-being can mean difference rather than total absence. A horse is not a tree because it is different from a tree. This allows negative statements to remain meaningful without requiring nothingness to become a mysterious object. Plato's move helped philosophy think more clearly about negation and identity. It also shows how far he was willing to follow a problem that most people would ignore. An everyday word like not turned out to contain a metaphysical puzzle about what language is capable of referring to. Parmenides subjects the theory of forms to some of Plato's hardest objections. The dialogue called Parmenides contains one of the strangest moments in Plato's entire body of work. A young Socrates presents ideas resembling the theory of forms, and the older philosopher Parmenides begins dismantling them. The objections are serious. If every group of similar things shares a form, where does the process stop? Are there forms for mud or hair? How can physical objects participate in something completely separate from them? If the forms exist in another realm, how could human beings know them at all? Plato does not rescue the theory with a neat answer. Instead, he leaves the difficulties exposed and moves into an extraordinarily demanding exercise in reasoning. This has puzzled readers for centuries because Plato appears to be attacking ideas strongly associated with his own philosophy. One possibility is that he wanted to refine them. Another is that the dialogue records genuine uncertainty. Either way, the text reveals something important about his intellectual method. Plato was willing to turn his strongest arguments against his own framework. Philosophy, in his hands, was not the defense of a sacred system. Even foundational ideas had to survive hostile questioning. One dialogue, therefore, contains Plato's own devastating criticism of Platonic ideas. This makes Plato unusual among great system builders. Instead of protecting his most famous concepts from attack, he places their weaknesses inside his own writing. The Parmenides does not offer mild corrections. It raises problems that could threaten the entire structure of the forms. If perfect realities are completely separate from the physical world, participation becomes mysterious. If they are somehow present in many things at once, their unity becomes difficult to explain. If there are forms for every category, the theory may multiply entities without limit. Plato allows these objections to land before providing anything resembling reassurance. That openness has produced a remarkable possibility. Some scholars think Plato's philosophy changed significantly over time because he recognized problems in his earlier thinking. Others believe the dialogue teaches readers how difficult a correct theory of forms must be. Either interpretation makes the work fascinating. Plato does not behave like someone trying to hide cracks in a doctrine. He exposes them publicly. The result is a kind of philosophical self-interrogation. The thinker most associated with Platonism may also be one of the earliest and strongest critics of simplistic Platonism. The third man problem threatens to generate an endless series of forms. The argument begins with something simple. Suppose several large objects are large because they participate in the form of largeness. Now compare those large objects with the form itself. If the form of largeness is also large, then all of them share the same property. That seems to require another form explaining what they have in common. But then the original objects, the first form and the second form, are all large together. A third form appears necessary. The process can continue forever. This is the famous third man problem. It threatens Plato's theory with an infinite regress because the explanation keeps generating another thing that needs explanation. The name became traditional later, but the basic problem appears in the Parmenides. Philosophers have argued ever since about whether the objection truly defeats the theory of forms or only a crude version of it. What makes the problem compelling is how quickly it grows from an innocent assumption. A theory designed to explain similarity suddenly produces an endless staircase of explanations. Plato preserved the objection himself, which suggests he understood exactly how dangerous it was to his own metaphysical project. Plato did not hide serious difficulties within the philosophy associated with him. His dialogues often preserve uncertainty rather than disguising it. Difficult objections are given intelligent advocates. Socrates can be confused. Entire investigations can fail. Later works sometimes complicate ideas that earlier works seem to present with confidence. This makes Plato harder to summarize than the word Platonism suggests. There is no single book in which he announces a complete system and tells readers exactly what to believe. Instead, philosophy unfolds through arguments that remain alive enough to challenge one another. That may be why interpreters have disagreed about Plato for more than 2,000 years. He left enough openness for radically different schools to claim him. Some emphasized mathematics. Others focused on mysticism. Others concentrated on ethics or political order. The ambiguity was not necessarily accidental. Plato seems to have wanted readers to practice philosophy rather than simply inherit conclusions. His willingness to preserve unresolved problems also separates wisdom from certainty. A profound thinker does not need to pretend every question has been conquered. Sometimes intellectual strength appears in recognizing precisely where explanation becomes difficult. Plato made room for that difficulty inside works intended to outlive him. The statesman separates genuine political knowledge from mere possession of authority. Plato returns to politics with a quieter and more complicated question. What actually makes someone a statesman? Holding office is not enough. Winning an election is not enough. Even possessing laws is not enough. The statesman searches for a distinctive kind of knowledge that allows a ruler to understand how a community should be guided. Plato compares political leadership with other crafts because a title does not automatically create expertise. Someone can own medical equipment without understanding medicine. In the same way, a person can occupy a throne while knowing little about governing. The dialogue also distinguishes statesmanship from tyranny. Both may involve command, but one rules with genuine knowledge, while the other relies on force. Plato becomes less interested here in grand constitutional labels and more interested in whether the person making decisions understands what different situations require. This is a subtle shift. Political legitimacy cannot be read directly from appearances. A government may look orderly while being badly guided. Another may break routine rules yet act intelligently in an emergency. Plato forces the reader to ask whether political authority is a position or a form of expertise. Good government sometimes requires judgment that written rules cannot fully anticipate. The Statesman contains a provocative challenge to rigid law. Plato imagines a genuinely wise ruler who understands what is best for citizens in changing circumstances. Written rules are general by nature. They cannot predict every unusual situation. A law might work well in most cases and fail badly in one exceptional case. Plato compares this with medicine. A doctor who leaves instructions before traveling might return to discover that the patient's condition has changed. Following the old instructions blindly could now cause harm. In theory, a perfectly knowledgeable statesman should be able to adapt just as a skilled doctor would. The problem is obvious. Real rulers are not perfectly wise, and allowing leaders to ignore laws can become extremely dangerous. Plato therefore creates a tension between expertise and legal restraint. Fixed rules are imperfect, but unrestricted discretion may be worse. This issue remains central to government today. Emergencies constantly produce arguments about when rules should bend. Plato saw the dilemma long ago. Law protects citizens from arbitrary power, yet no written code can contain enough detail to anticipate every circumstance human life can produce. Plato compared statesmanship to weaving different human temperaments into civic unity. The image comes from the statesman and offers a different picture of politics from command or conquest. A weaver takes threads with contrasting qualities and combines them into one durable fabric. Plato thinks a ruler faces something similar with human character. Some citizens are naturally bold and forceful. Others are cautious and restrained. A society dominated entirely by aggressive temperaments may become violent. A society composed only of cautious people may become passive when courage is needed. Statesmanship, therefore, involves joining different kinds of character so they strengthen rather than destroy one another. Plato even connects this with marriage and education because social bonds can help balance opposing tendencies across generations. The idea is surprisingly sophisticated. Political unity does not require everyone to become identical. Difference can be useful when it is arranged intelligently. The challenge is preventing one temperament from becoming absolute. Plato's statesman is therefore less like a commander issuing orders and more like someone managing human contrasts. A stable society emerges when qualities that could become enemies are woven into cooperation. Politics becomes the art of creating strength from differences that might otherwise pull a community apart. The laws replaces philosopher kings with institutions designed for imperfect human beings. Plato's final political vision looks noticeably different from the Republic. The ideal philosopher king is no longer the central solution. Instead, the laws focuses heavily on constitutions, procedures, education, penalties, and institutions. This change has often been interpreted as a movement toward political realism. Perhaps Plato came to believe that perfectly wise rulers were too rare to build a functioning system around. If ideal wisdom cannot be guaranteed, law must do more of the work. The dialogue designs a second-best city rather than a perfect one. Property is regulated. Officials are selected through complicated procedures. Citizens receive moral education intended to support the legal structure. Plato even writes lengthy introductions to laws because he wants citizens to understand their purpose rather than obey through fear alone. The result is still highly controlling by modern standards, but it reveals an important development. Good government cannot depend entirely on finding extraordinary individuals. Institutions must be capable of limiting ordinary human weaknesses. Plato had begun with the dream of wisdom ruling directly. He ended by asking how law might preserve order when perfect wisdom is unavailable. Plato's longest dialogue contains no appearance by Socrates at all. The Laws stretches across 12 books and is usually regarded as Plato's longest surviving work. Yet the figure who dominates so many earlier dialogues is completely absent. There is no Socrates asking irritating questions in an Athenian marketplace. Instead, 3 older men walk through Crete while discussing how a new city should be organized. The main speaker is known simply as the Athenian stranger. This absence is striking because Socrates had become almost inseparable from Plato's literary identity. Why remove him from the final political project? Nobody knows for certain. The Laws may represent a later stage of Plato's thinking that required a different voice. Its tone is also more institutional and practical. Detailed legislation replaces much of the dramatic questioning found in earlier works. The missing Socrates therefore becomes a clue. Plato's philosophy was still evolving, and he did not need to force every idea through the same character. The dialogue feels like the work of a thinker confronting old age and political limitation. Instead of asking what the perfect city would look like, he asks what might actually survive among imperfect people. An unnamed Athenian leads the philosophical conversation throughout the Laws. Plato gives his final major political speaker no personal name. He is simply the Athenian stranger. That literary choice has encouraged speculation for centuries. Some readers have wondered whether the character represents Plato more directly than Socrates ever did. Others think the anonymity keeps attention on the arguments rather than the speaker's identity. The stranger travels with Cleinias from Crete and Megillus from Sparta. Their conversation allows Plato to compare different political traditions while designing a hypothetical colony called Magnesia. Unlike Socrates, the Athenian often speaks at great length and develops detailed proposals instead of mainly questioning others. He sounds more like a legislator than a street philosopher. This creates a distinctive atmosphere. The dialogue feels less like intellectual combat and more like constitutional construction. The unnamed speaker also embodies a curious tension. He comes from Athens, the city that executed Socrates, yet he is entrusted with imagining better laws. Plato may be using an Athenian voice to reconsider the political failures of Athens from within. The identity remains hidden, but the role is unmistakable. Someone must translate philosophy into institutions. Late Plato placed greater emphasis on practical institutions and legal restraint. The movement from the Republic to the Laws is one of the most revealing developments in Plato's political thought. Earlier, the ideal city depends heavily on rulers who possess extraordinary wisdom. Later, Plato seems more willing to work with ordinary human limitations. Laws become essential because people cannot be expected to behave wisely at every moment. Offices are structured to distribute responsibility. Procedures attempt to prevent concentration of power. Education is still central, but it operates within a system that assumes character can fail. This does not make late Plato liberal in a modern sense. His city remains intensely regulated. Yet the shift matters because it recognizes the danger of relying on exceptional individuals. A constitution should not collapse simply because one ruler becomes selfish or foolish. Institutions must create stability beyond personality. Plato had first-hand experience with political disappointment, especially through his attempts to influence rulers in Sicily. Those experiences may have deepened his caution. Philosophy still provides the goal, but law becomes the mechanism that protects society when wisdom is incomplete. The perfect ruler may remain imaginable. A durable political system must be designed for people who are not perfect. Timaeus presents the cosmos as ordered by an intelligent craftsman called the demiurge. Plato's Timaeus offers a creation story, unlike the familiar idea of a deity producing everything from nothing. The central figure is the demiurge. The word means craftsman. He looks upon an eternal, intelligible pattern and tries to make the visible universe resemble it as closely as possible. The cosmos, therefore, becomes the product of rational ordering rather than arbitrary construction. The demiurge is good, so he wants the world to possess as much order as its materials allow. Plato uses this framework to explain why mathematics seems woven into nature. The universe reflects intelligence because its maker worked according to intelligible structure. Later, religious thinkers became fascinated by this figure and interpreted it in radically different ways. Some saw the demiurge as compatible with a supreme creator. Certain Gnostic traditions later turned a similarly named figure into a flawed or lesser being, although that portrayal differs sharply from Plato's. The original Platonic demiurge is benevolent. What makes the idea compelling is its scale. Plato imagines the entire visible cosmos as something constructed according to reason, almost as though reality itself were the work of an unimaginably skilled designer. The demiurge organizes existing disorder rather than creating reality from absolute nothingness. This detail makes Plato's cosmology surprisingly different from later creation doctrines. Before the ordered cosmos appears, the Timaeus describes a condition of disorder involving basic materials and a mysterious receptacle. The demiurge does not call everything into existence from complete absence. He imposes mathematical order upon what is already there. Plato's divine craftsman therefore resembles an architect working with difficult material rather than an unlimited creator facing nothing at all. This also provides a possible explanation for imperfection. The world is good because intelligence shaped it, yet it is not identical with the perfect model because physical becoming has limitations. Disorder can be reduced without disappearing completely. Later philosophers wrestled with this distinction because it changes the relationship between divinity and matter. If matter or receptivity exists independently of the craftsman's act, reality contains more than one fundamental principle. Plato does not present the scene as straightforward history. Timaeus repeatedly calls his account a likely story. That phrase leaves room for mystery. The cosmology may be a model rather than a literal report. Even so, the image is unforgettable. Creation becomes the conversion of chaos into intelligible structure. Plato described the universe itself as a living and intelligent being. In the Timaeus, the cosmos is not a dead collection of objects moving through empty space. Plato imagines it as a single living creature, equipped with soul and intelligence. The demiurge gives the universe a world soul, so that rational order can govern its motions. The stars and planets become parts of this greater living system. Even time is tied to the ordered movements of the heavens. This vision later influenced Stoicism, Neoplatonism, Renaissance thought, and many spiritual cosmologies that treated nature as fundamentally alive. Plato's universe therefore feels very different from the mechanical picture that became dominant in later science. The cosmos has unity. Its parts belong to a larger whole. Human souls exist within an immense living order, rather than an indifferent machine. Modern science does not treat the universe as a literal organism in Plato's sense, but the idea continues to attract speculative thinkers. It raises a question that remains difficult to dismiss completely. If consciousness appears within the universe, could mind be more deeply connected with cosmic structure than ordinary material assumptions suggest? Plato placed that possibility near the beginning of Western cosmological thought. Mathematical proportion helps explain cosmic order throughout the Timaeus. Plato's universe is built through relationships rather than random arrangement. the world's soul itself is described using mathematical ratios. The elements are connected with geometrical solids. Harmonic proportion helps explain how different parts of the cosmos fit together into unity. Plato was drawing on traditions that associated number with the hidden structure of reality. The Pythagoreans had already discovered that musical intervals correspond to simple numerical ratios. That discovery must have seemed astonishing. Something as emotional as harmony could be expressed mathematically. Plato expanded the intuition toward the universe itself. Perhaps beauty and order arise because reality contains proportion at its deepest level. Some details of his cosmology are scientifically obsolete, but the larger idea became enormously influential. Modern physics also describes nature through mathematics, although for very different reasons and methods. This creates a fascinating historical echo. Plato could not have known modern equations, yet he believed the cosmos was intelligible because numerical structure lay beneath appearances. His speculation helped establish a powerful intellectual instinct. When nature looks complicated, search for the relationship that makes the complexity coherent. Mathematics might reveal an order that ordinary observation cannot see directly. Atlantis was introduced as part of a larger discussion about ideal societies. The famous lost civilization does not appear in Plato as an isolated adventure story. Atlantis enters after a conversation about political organization. In the Timaeus, Socrates has just heard a description of an ideal state and asks to see such a society tested in action. Critias responds with an old story about ancient Athens confronting a vast island power. Atlantis therefore functions as a political contrast. It begins wealthy and magnificently organized, but its rulers gradually lose the divine quality that once restrained them. Material ambition grows stronger. Ancient Athens stands against this imperial power and resists it. The story then moves toward catastrophe. This setting matters because later retellings often remove Atlantis from Plato's philosophical purpose. Once separated from the dialogue, the island becomes a free-floating mystery that can be placed almost anywhere on Earth. Inside Plato's work, it is tied to questions about virtue and political decline. That does not prove the story is fictional, but it changes the context in which it first appears. Atlantis was never merely a lost place. From the beginning, it was also a warning about what happens when power outgrows character. Critias breaks off abruptly before Plato finishes the story of Atlantis. The surviving text stops at the most tantalizing possible moment. Zeus sees that Atlantis has become morally corrupted and decides to punish it. He summons the gods together and prepares to speak. Then, the dialogue ends. No divine speech follows. No detailed destruction appears. We never receive Plato's full account of the final catastrophe. Scholars generally think Critias was left unfinished, although exactly why remains unknown. Plato may have abandoned the work. He may have died before completing it. A continuation could conceivably have existed and been lost, but there is no firm evidence. This abrupt ending helped give Atlantis an unusual afterlife. Readers know enough to imagine grandeur and disaster, yet the authoritative version never closes the story. That vacuum invited later generations to fill it with speculation. Every missing detail became available for reconstruction. Where exactly was the island? What destroyed it? How advanced was its civilization? Plato offers some clues, but denies us the ending that might have constrained interpretation. One of history's greatest legends therefore survives, partly because its original storyteller stopped before the final scene. Plato traveled to Sicily and became entangled in attempts at political reform. Plato was not merely an armchair thinker imagining government from safety. Ancient accounts connect him with repeated journeys to Syracuse and Sicily, where philosophy collided directly with royal politics. The city was ruled by powerful men surrounded by wealth and intrigue. Plato became associated with Dion, an aristocrat who admired philosophy and hoped political leadership could be transformed through education. The opportunity must have been irresistible. Here was a chance to test whether a ruler could be trained toward wisdom, rather than merely advised from a distance. The results were disappointing and sometimes dangerous. Court factions distrusted Plato's influence. Personal rivalries complicated every philosophical ambition. Later traditions even claim Plato was sold into slavery during one of his adventures, although the details remain uncertain. What matters is that his political ideas were tested against a world far messier than the Republic. Syracuse showed how difficult it is to change institutions by educating one powerful individual. Philosophy entered a palace and discovered that ambition does not disappear simply because someone has heard good arguments. Plato returned from Sicily with experience that may have deepened his political realism. His involvement with Syracuse tested whether philosophical education could transform a ruler. The experiment centered on Dionysius the Younger. He inherited power in Syracuse and became the focus of hopes that education might turn a monarch toward philosophy. Dion encouraged Plato to come because the situation seemed to offer a rare opening. If a ruler could learn self-discipline and serious reasoning, perhaps something resembling philosophical government could emerge without revolution. Plato traveled there despite the risks. The reality was far less inspiring. Dionysius showed interest in philosophy, but also remained embedded in court politics. Suspicion grew around Dion, who was eventually exiled. Plato found himself caught between personal loyalties and the ruler's insecurity. The episode exposes a weakness in the dream of enlightened leadership. Education can offer knowledge, but it cannot guarantee that someone with enormous power will surrender vanity or fear. The ruler must actually want transformation. Syracuse therefore became a living test of the philosopher-king idea and produced no clear triumph. Plato discovered that political power changes the conditions under which learning occurs. A student who can punish his teacher is not an ordinary student. Philosophy may speak truth to power, but power retains the option of refusing to listen. Dion became central to Plato's dangerous encounter with real political power. Dion was a Syracusan aristocrat with close ties to the ruling family and a serious interest in philosophy. He became Plato's friend and the key political figure linking the academy with Syracuse. Dion hoped philosophical principles could reform the city's leadership. His relationship with Dionysius the Younger soon deteriorated, and he was forced into exile. The story then took a dramatic turn. Dion eventually returned to Sicily with a small force and captured Syracuse. For a time, the philosopher's friend became a revolutionary ruler. Yet the outcome was not the establishment of a Platonic utopia. Political conflict continued. Dion struggled with opposition and was eventually assassinated by Callippus, who had connections with Plato's academy. The entire episode reads almost like a warning about translating philosophy into power. But intentions did not eliminate factional rivalry. Education did not prevent betrayal. A man influenced by Plato could overthrow a regime and still fail to create political stability. Dion's fate must have been personally devastating. It also demonstrated that political virtue requires more than possessing the right ideas. Once philosophy enters real struggles for authority, consequences become unpredictable. The authenticity of Plato's autobiographical seventh letter remains disputed among scholars. Among the letters attributed to Plato, the seventh is by far the most famous because it appears to explain his political experiences in his own voice. It describes disappointment with Athenian politics, his relationship with Dion, and his involvement in Syracuse. It also contains striking comments about philosophy itself. The writer suggests that the deepest understanding cannot simply be written down like ordinary information. Instead, insight emerges after sustained engagement, until comprehension suddenly appears. If Plato truly wrote the letter, it gives us an extraordinary window into how he understood his own life and teaching. The problem is authenticity. Scholars have debated for generations whether the document genuinely comes from Plato or from a later author who knew his world extremely well. Arguments exist on both sides. The uncertainty makes the letter even more intriguing. One of our most personal portraits of Plato may be his own testimony, or it may be an ancient reconstruction created by someone else. Either way, the text influenced how generations imagined him. Historical evidence can sometimes place us in a peculiar position. The document closest to a confession may also be the document whose author we cannot confidently identify. Aristotle studied in Plato's intellectual circle for roughly 2 decades. When Aristotle arrived in Athens as a young man, he joined Plato's academy and remained associated with it for about 20 years. The relationship became one of the most consequential teacher-student connections in intellectual history. Aristotle eventually disagreed with Plato on major questions, especially the separate existence of forms. Yet disagreement did not erase influence. The academy provided the environment in which Aristotle developed his extraordinary range of interests. He later wrote about logic, biology, ethics, politics, rhetoric, and much more. This created a fascinating philosophical divergence. Plato often looked towards stable realities beyond changing particulars. Aristotle became more determined to study the structures within the things around us. Their different approaches shaped centuries of debate. Medieval scholars would eventually build enormous systems around both traditions. The image of Aristotle simply rejecting Plato is therefore too crude. A student can oppose a teacher precisely because the teacher taught him how to think seriously. The academy created space for intellectual descendants who were not required to become copies. Plato's influence reached its greatest power partly through a pupil who became famous for challenging some of his most characteristic ideas. Plato's academy took its name from the Athenian place where members gathered. The word academy now refers to institutions across the world, but its origin is surprisingly local. Plato taught near a grove outside the walls of Athens, associated with a figure called Akademos, or Hekademos. The place eventually gave its name to Plato's school. Over centuries, that geographical label became a general word for organized learning. Every modern academy therefore carries a faint linguistic trace of ancient Athens. The original community was not a university with departments and formal degrees. It was closer to an intellectual association centered on philosophical and mathematical inquiry. Members studied together and debated difficult problems. Later leaders continued the institution after Plato's death, although its doctrines changed over time. The academy became so famous that its name outgrew the location that created it. This is an extraordinary example of cultural survival hidden inside everyday language. A word now used for schools, scientific institutions, and artistic organizations began with people gathering near one particular Athenian landscape more than 2,000 years ago. Plato did not merely leave arguments behind. The physical place where his circle met gave the modern world one of its most familiar words for organized knowledge. Ancient Platonism continued evolving for centuries after Plato himself had died. Plato's death did not freeze his philosophy. Different generations interpreted his dialogues in new ways and emphasized different parts of his thought. Early leaders of the academy developed mathematical and metaphysical ideas. Later members became skeptical and argued that certainty might be impossible. Still later thinkers returned to more dogmatic interpretations. This means there was never one uninterrupted ancient Platonism speaking with a single voice. Plato's writings acted more like a vast intellectual landscape that different schools explored from different directions. Some readers focused on ethics. Others became fascinated by the hierarchy of reality or the destiny of the soul. By the Roman era, Platonic philosophy was interacting with religious traditions and increasingly taking on spiritual dimensions. This long evolution is important because many ideas later called Platonic were developed centuries after Plato himself. His influence became a living tradition rather than a museum piece. Each generation found new possibilities in the dialogues. A philosopher who deliberately avoided writing a simple textbook created works flexible enough to survive enormous cultural changes. Plato's thought lasted partly because it could keep being rediscovered rather than merely preserved. Later, Platonists transformed his philosophy into powerful spiritual systems of ascent. Centuries after Plato, thinkers such as Plotinus developed what is now called Neoplatonism. They interpreted reality as a hierarchy flowing from an ultimate source called the One. Below the One came intellect and soul. The physical world occupied a lower level but remained connected with the higher order from which it emerged. Human spiritual life became a process of returning toward its source. Contemplation and philosophical purification could lift awareness beyond ordinary attachment. These ideas were not simply copied from Plato, but they drew heavily from themes scattered across his dialogues. The form of the good became especially important. Later, Platonists turned it into the center of a vast metaphysical vision. Their influence spread far beyond pagan philosophy. Christian, Jewish, and Islamic thinkers all encountered Platonic ideas through different channels. Mystics found his language of ascent particularly powerful. A theory that began with questions about knowledge and reality became part of spiritual maps describing how the soul might return toward ultimate unity. Plato could never have predicted every development. Yet his refusal to reduce reality to visible matter gave later thinkers a framework spacious enough to support entire traditions of transcendence. Plato's enduring challenge is to examine what deserves to govern your life. Across the dialogues, the same problem keeps returning in different forms. Human beings are always being ruled by something. It may be appetite, it may be fear, it may be reputation or habit. Plato asks whether those forces deserve the authority we give them. His political philosophy and psychology eventually converge on this point. A badly governed city suffers when the wrong people hold power. A badly governed person suffers when the wrong motive holds power. Philosophy becomes the search for a better ruler within. That does not mean suppressing every desire or rejecting ordinary life. It means asking which part of ourselves can see beyond the immediate moment and judge what contributes to a life worth living. Plato's answer centers on reason guided by an understanding of the good. Even readers who reject his metaphysics can still feel the force of the question. Every repeated choice strengthens something. Every habit gives some motive greater influence. A life therefore requires an internal constitution over time. Plato leaves us with a demanding possibility. Self-improvement may begin by discovering not what you want next, but what inside you has been deciding what counts as worth wanting. And so we come to the end of our journey through the world of Plato. We have followed his ideas from the streets of ancient Athens into questions that still feel alive today. We have explored the nature of reality, the structure of the soul, the dangers of unchecked desire, and the strange possibility that wisdom begins by admitting what we do not know. We have seen how Plato connected private character with public life, and how he believed education could shape the direction of an entire society. We have also wandered through some of his most enduring mysteries: the lost world of Atlantis, the divided soul, the philosopher king, the forms, the possibility of immortality. Ideas that have echoed through philosophy for more than 2,000 years and still invite us to look at ordinary life in a different way. But now, there is nothing more you need to solve. You can let the questions rest. Let your shoulders soften into the surface beneath you. Let your breathing become slower and easier. Allow the thoughts from tonight to drift further into the background, like distant voices gradually fading from a quiet room. If you enjoyed this journey, you are always welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps more sleepy souls find their way here. And if you happen to still be awake, another journey will be waiting for you on the screen. You can follow it whenever you are ready, or simply let the night take over from here. For now, allow your mind to settle. There is nowhere else you need to be. Sleep well, and good night.